They freaked out when asked if they were asleep, scrambling to check the time had to send the update already. Reaching for the mouse, they grabbed something, and then someone screamed. They were confused by how soft the mouse was and the missing keys when someone called them master and moaned to stop touching it. Hearing master, the man snapped back to reality, totally surprised. Then it hit him. He realized he was holding some girl's chest and freaked out, cursing in his head, wondering if this was some crazy dream because it was definitely top tier. Smirking, he said dreams leave no trace, so hey, might as well enjoy it more. The girl begged him to stop, calling him master again. Flustered, she shouted, no. She begged him to stop, thinking if she ran, he'd get mad and probably end her. Stopping himself, he muttered it felt too real, how could a dream be this vivid? Suddenly it clicked. The girl was still in chaos when he asked if she was Tsang Yuling. Groaning in pain, he complained of a headache, freaking Tsang Yuling out. She begged him not to scare her. Tsang Yuling shuddered in fear, thinking if he died now, the whole sect would suspect her. She imagined the masters closing in, ready to torture her, and muttered nervously. Suddenly, he reached out and called her name. He gently touched her face, telling her not to cry. Tsang Yuling froze when he assured her he was fine. She wailed, begging him not to die, thinking if he did, she'd be doomed. Meanwhile, she thought, is he actually comforting me gently? Did his brain fry? The man glared at her, asking why she was crying and if she wanted him to do something about it. Tsang Yuling snapped out of it and immediately stopped crying. She smiled, relieved, and told him to stay fine, leaving him speechless. Turning away, he slapped his forehead, muttering about how he designed Tsang Yuling to be cute, so why was she so different? He realized he'd somehow crossed into his own novel, Long Yashan. Shen Shi, the Golden Core Cultivator, flexed that he's the second master of Shangding Xianzong and a ruthless guy who'll do anything to get stronger. Shen Shi remembered how he eyed the protagonist's treasures, lied, bullied, and even tried to off him from the start. Then, when the protagonist hit Jingden, his first move was to take down Shen Shi, who just completed the golden elixir. Shen Shi gritted his teeth, whining about how useless he was, his life worse than death, and the protagonist just had insane luck. This whole thing was one big cliché. Tsang Yuling was shook when Shen Shi casually mentioned that. Plot twist, he became the first cannon fodder sacrificed to the heavens by the protagonist. Shen Shi wondered if it was his own fault for giving the villain his own name, regretting he didn't make himself the protagonist's buddy or Goldfinger. Then he stopped, realizing he just mentioned Goldfinger. Shen Shi stared at his hand, muttering about how a traveler like him should have had a system or cheat code, according to the rules. He raised his hand, ready to summon his super-villain system. But nothing happened. Shen Shi was speechless, and Tsang Yuling was lost. Shen Shi muttered, guess it's not the right setting. He started calling out for all kinds of systems: corrupt gold, lottery, hate, love. Tsang Yuling was just more confused. When nothing happened, Shen Shi muttered to himself, wondering if it was playing hard to get because he wasn't the typical system genre protagonist. Shen Shi flopped onto his bed, wondering if he'd just die here for real. Out of nowhere, Tsang Yuling flopped on the bed beside him, trying to comfort him. Shen Shi explained Tsang Yuling was his youngest disciple, who only started idolizing him after the protagonist showed up. He realized, according to the timeline, the protagonist hadn't even met Shangding Xianzong yet, let alone seek revenge. Shen Shi scowled, imagining himself grabbing and licking someone's feet. He muttered, the protagonist's lucky but short-sighted. If I max out favor with the big guy and become his number one lackey, I'll ride to the top, plus Shangding Xianzong's got plenty of beauties. Shen Shi smirked, thinking, from this angle, life's looking pretty good. He flashed Tsang Yuling a smile, deciding he should work on fixing his violent, chaotic image. Then, Tsang Yuling burst into tears, asking how he could do this when she was so young. He pouted, thinking, I haven't even done anything. Shen Shi stared at her teary face, muttering, this feels wrong. But if it fits the character, should I just do it? As he reached for her clothes, Shen Shi murmured, this isn't for me, it's for the readers. Likes, comments, and views are gonna explode. But his face twisted into a dark, ugly expression. He told Tsang Yuling to stop crying and zip it, looking seriously annoyed. Tsang Yuling flashed a big smile and was like, okay. Shen Shi grumbled that he couldn't bully the poor kid, so he'd have to work on his image, and win over his apprentices before they all switched sides. Xianyu suddenly popped up outside, calling out to Shen Shi, saying she had some news. Xianyu, looking all stressed, said it had been forever since Tsang Yuling took the tea to the master, and hoped she didn't mess things up. Shen Shi moved toward the door, ready to find Xian Yu, with Seng Yuling following him like a puppy. He noted that his second disciple was supposed to be the sweet, sentimental sister, but sadly, she wasn't exactly top tier. He remembered that in the plot, he killed her for covering the protagonist, sparking a revenge plot, but he wasn't about to do something that dumb now. He started drooling over the jade, saying it was the most important thing right now, filled with inscriptions. He planned to use his chi-dai to check out Xian Yu as he opened the door, asking her what's up. Xian Yu was already bowing low when Shen Shi took a look at her. Shen Shi sighed, saying her entrance was unique, but no one could really see her up close, so he cursed the author. He told Xian Yu to get up already. Xian Yu quickly nodded, looked up, and said Xing Jingtang had sent an invitation. Shen Shi had a nosebleed and couldn't stop drooling, giving a thumbs up, thinking Xian Yu had a nice figure. Xian Yu saw Tsang Yuling and was like, "Thank goodness, you're okay." Shen Shi realized Xian Yu was talking about Xing Jingtang, and yep, that was the admin department of Shangding Xianzong. Xian Yu froze, looking scared, as Shen Shi demanded to see the invitation. She trembled, confessing that the invitation hadn't even been finalized yet. Xian Yu freaked out, saying it was over because she lied to cover for Tsang Yuling, and with her low talent, Shen Shi might just kill her. Shen Shi realized Xian Yu made up the invitation to cover Tsang Yuling, and he couldn't help but think his apprentices were so clueless. With a serious face, Shen Shi told Xian Yu she could take Tsang Yuling, but only this once, while secretly planning to give her a break. Xian Yu perked up instantly and agreed. Shen Shi helped Xian Yu up, saying she didn't have to kneel or worship him, just a regular greeting next time. Xian Yu was all flustered, asking what he meant by that. Shen Shi sighed, annoyed by just the sight of Xian Yu's back, telling her to keep it together and be obedient. Watching Xian Yu and Tsang Yuling leave, Shen Shi sighed. His villainous vibe was going to make earning their trust a full-on struggle. Shen Shi sighed again, deciding he might as well play the master card and actually guide them for once. Xian Yu, still flustered, glanced back at Shen Shi, catching Tsang Yuling's eye. Xian Yu stared at Shen Shi, lost in her thoughts. Her face turned bright red as she couldn't stop thinking about him. Tsang Yuling smirked, teasing Xian Yu about her blush and asking if she thought Shen Shi was hot, which left Xian Yu stammering, denying the nonsense. Airby Peak was Shen Shi's private spot, with spiritual power almost as high as the main peaks. The peak held 2 pristine fields, one for rare Edelweiss herbs, the other, his jade hotbed, was a sacred space for cultivation breakthroughs. These treasures were Shen Shi's alone, and with his gold core power, even jealous peak masters wouldn't dare mess with him. As Shen Shi climbed, he thought about the mutated Edelweiss in his garden, his secret plug, and no one had noticed yet. He'd grab it before anyone else did. Smiling, Shen Shi reminded himself he wrote the plot, nothing could possibly go wrong, right? Just as he was about to ease his worries, something interrupted him. Shen Shi freaked out when he saw cranes in his garden, cursing them for stealing from his precious space. He rushed to chase them off, calling them beasts, warning them they were digging their own graves. Fuming, Shen Shi unleashed his aura, threatening the cranes to see how far they could run. Using his skill, Mountains Descend, a massive barrier appeared, trapping the cranes. As the cranes dropped, Shen Shi anxiously checked the herbs, muttering that they shouldn't treat his precious plug-in like a snack. Those birds had 0 brains, and his disciples needed a serious house-sitting lesson. Enraged, Shen Shi pulled out his device, commanding everyone to gather at his precious Edelweiss garden. Out of nowhere, Shen Shi spotted a couple of people hustling up the stairs. Noticing their slow pace, Shen Shi sighed clearly. He'd need to arrange some serious training tomorrow. A few moments later, Xian Yu, Tsang Yuling, and another disciple showed up, out of breath. Shen Shi cut them off, telling them to chill until they caught their breath. Shen Shi stood in front of the panting disciple, ordering her to stand up. As the disciple caught her breath, Shen Shi couldn't help but notice her features more clearly, his surprise evident. The disciple quickly complied, standing up with a nod. Shen Shi nearly short-circuited when he realized it was Han Xian Pai, the prodigy with fire and wood roots. But with a physique that screamed, "You weren't ready for this, were you?" He remembered she was basically a background NPC meant to showcase his villain arc, yet she still managed to keep everything running like a responsible intern. She tilted her head, confused, as Shen Shi dramatically looked away, completely unaware that he was low-key nosebleeding while thinking, "Damn, she really built different." The 3 disciples froze at the sight of the cranes committing plant-based war crimes, while Shen Shi groaned, "Who let these feathery thieves turn my premium herbs into their lunch buffet?" The disciples gave each other the classic bro, don't snitch look while sweating bullets. Shen Shi sighed. He was supposed to be the villain, yet these kids were out here forming a ride or die squad. He narrowed his eyes. Y'all just gonna stand there or actually say something? Shen Shi had a lightbulb moment. Brain blast. It had to be Dong Yuli. Ah, right. His eldest disciple was on garden duty, except she was currently benched after his last villain moment. He sighed, realizing it was technically his fault, except the disciples heard that and immediately panicked. Xianyu hit full crisis mode, bowing so fast she nearly broke the sound barrier, taking the blame like a drama protagonist. Shen Shi snapped, "Alright, that's enough. You're louder than a live streamer with a broken mic." He squinted. "Are you telling me how to do my job?" Xianyu, shaking, immediately denied all allegations. "Scram, do your thing. And stop testing my patience," Shen Shi grumbled, still committed to the villain aesthetic even though he wasn't actually punishing anyone. He watched them run like NPCs fleeing a boss battle, pouting, "Damn, am I really that terrifying?" Airby Peak had 3 zones: newbie housing, mid-tier upgrades, and VIP Shen Shi Lounge. The second area was for the main character energy disciples. And the third? Shen Shi's personal hideout, obviously. Shen Shi pointed out that this area had an exclusive boost your XP array, basically a training cheat code. Shen Shi frowned. Why were his disciples chilling in Noob City instead of grinding to reach the premium zone? He strolled up to Dong Yuli's place, totally unprepared for what was coming. Just as he reached for the door, he remembered he kinda glossed over her injury in the novel and prayed it wasn't that bad. He swung the door open like a dramatic anime protagonist, only to instantly regret it. Dong Yuli let out a high-pitched Shen Shi while flailing in real time. Shenshi.exe stopped responding. Dong Yuli spun around at light speed, stammering apologies while practically begging him to get out. Shen Shi noped out, shutting the door like his life depended on it. He turned red, muttering that true happiness wasn't wealth or power, it was cats eating fish, dogs eating meat, and him accidentally witnessing peak fan service. His grin faded as his brows knitted. Those scars weren't part of the premium package. He remembered she was his first disciple, the most bullied, the strongest, and the only one who didn't ghost him when things went south. He assured himself it was different now. He wasn't about to let history repeat like a bad sequel. Dong Yuli sank into the water, mumbling existential questions like, "He saw me naked, now what? Is he about to go full villain arc?" The silence stretched. Did he leave? Did he faint? Did he just uninstall himself from existence? She pouted, cheeks burning. Did he just dip because he wasn't interested? Rude. Her heart jumped as the door swung open again. Round 2. Panic mode activated as he strode in, looming over her like a final boss. He reached for his robe, and she short-circuited. Hold up, wasn't this moving a bit too fast? He ordered her to open her mouth. She tried to protest, something about ethics, but her body autopiloted into compliance. She obeyed, muttering that if he planned another hellish training session, she might just ascend early. He casually shoved something in her mouth, and she nearly choked. What kind of plot twist was this? Her face hit max heat levels, trembling like a glitching NPC. What just happened? He revealed it was a yuan elixir, a super rare one, casually flexing that he had 10 like it was pocket change. Energy burst out of her, and he waved it off like, yeah, don't waste it, start grinding. She snapped into cultivation mode. When free buffs drop, you don't ask questions. He strolled out, sighing that after hemorrhaging wealth like that, she better level up. Night fell, fireflies vibing in the air like a peaceful anime ending. Rustling in the bushes cue the horror movie tension. Xianyu hissed for silence, fearing death by master, while Tseng Yuling hit her with a confident thumbs up. Stealth 100. Tseng Yuling shrugged, saying the guy grinds levels at night, he wouldn't notice a thing. Xianyu insisted on max caution. After all, their no cultivation sugar daddy had helped fund this precious healing pill. She knocked urgently, whisper yelling for Dong Yuli to open up express delivery, healing edition. With no response, Tseng Yuling assumed she was asleep, while Xianyu, wide-eyed, feared she had just collapsed post-Shen Shi punishment. Alarmed by the possibility, Tseng Yuling decided immediate action was needed and launched herself at the door like a human battering ram. The door, unfortunately, wasn't locked. She flew straight through and met the floor with full impact. As Tseng Yuling writhed on the ground, Xianyu's attention snapped elsewhere, eyes widening. Dong Yuli, glowing and serene mid-bath, looked straight out of a cultivation breakthrough scene. Xianyu, awestruck, questioned if she had just transcended. Xianyu marveled at her instant recovery, while Tseng Yuling, momentarily distracted, fixated on other impressive details. Before they could react, an iron grip yanked them backward, catching them completely off guard. Turning around, they froze at the sight of Shen Shi, whose raised brow clearly demanded an explanation for their midnight intrusion. Xian Yu, sweating, gestured toward the medicine bottle in her hand, while Tseng Yuling, unfazed, casually threw out a greeting. Noticing the medicine, Shen Shi pieced it together, useless at cultivation, but at least their hearts were in the right place. He informed them of her ongoing breakthrough and dismissed them, making it clear they were better off leaving. They nodded obediently as he turned away, uninterested in further discussion. Tseng Yuling nudged Xian Yu, suspicious of Shen Shi's sudden kindness, wondering if this was still the same strict master they knew. Xian Yu, watching him leave, wasn't sure either. Shen Shi, deep in thought, admitted to himself that what started as mere plot manipulation had turned into genuine responsibility now. He actually liked them. As dawn painted the sky orange, air by peak remained as peaceful as ever. Shen Shi sat in meditation, focusing his energy in complete silence. Running through his abilities, he acknowledged his water and wood dual spirit root, proficiency in illusions, traps, and healing, with overlapping mountains as his strongest technique. He recalled the hierarchy of cultivation arts. Spirit arts sat at the bottom, meaning no matter how well he mastered it, true strength remained out of reach. Studying his hand, he acknowledged his golden core stage, just one step from nascent soul, but in the grand scheme of the story, even at his peak, he was only designed to be the protagonist's early game boss. Gathering his aura, he decided to put it to the test. Without hesitation, he hurled the energy forward. The energy swirled around a chair, colliding against its edges with unpredictable force. The chair, unable to withstand the force, collapsed into pieces. Despite his lack of enthusiasm, he admitted the sensation was surprisingly satisfying. Shen Shi resumed meditating, reminding himself that a proper master shouldn't slack off. No freeloading on disciples' progress. Time zoomed by, and the sky was now rocking that twilight aesthetic. A door creaked open, breaking the peaceful vibe. Shen Shi stepped out, squinting like a confused protagonist, wondering what plot twist awaited him. Standing at the peak, he pondered if life was running on his cheat codes. He side-eyed his own progress. Was he speedrunning cultivation or what? The world practically rolled out the red carpet, buffing him up while nerfing his enemy's peak main character treatment. He flashed a grin, fully embracing his overpowered existence. Fist in the air, he celebrated. If heaven was giving him hacks, who was he to say no? God tier, here he comes. He decided to play it cool and not speedrun to godhood just yet. Gotta keep the plot interesting. He smirked, realizing that no matter how many protagonist perks the hero got, he'd always be ahead. Scripted dominance. Drooling at the thought, he realized he'd always be the protagonist's all-powerful mentor, totally not the MC himself, of course. His villainous cackle echoed across the peak. Classic power trip moment. The next morning, the sun was flexing its brightness, and the weather was in a good mood. Tseng Yuling, looking like a half-asleep panda, mumbled a lazy morning to her sisters. Xian Yu and Han Xianpai exchanged worried glances. Someone clearly had a rough night. She shuddered, confessing that Shen Shi's nightmare-inducing cackle had robbed her of sleep. As Han Xianpai helped freshen up the zombie-like Tseng Yuling, Xian Yu rushed them. Shen Shi had summoned them for an early morning quest. The moment she finished scrubbing off her sleepiness, they bolted up the mountain, with Xian Yu yelling, "Hurry, boss, Shen Shi is waiting." Shen Shi lounged on a rock, yawning. He'd been waiting so long he might need a nap himself. The lady leaned in, whispering like a secret informant, "They're here." He blinked at her, momentarily speechless. Why the dramatic delivery? It was Dong Yuli, and Shen Shi casually noted her smooth rank-up girl was grinding levels. Spotting the three panting like they'd run a marathon, Shen Shi nodded. Yep, their turn next. He told them they needed to be up every morning, an hour of cultivation, and if they got it, they should start now. Xian Yu and Tseng Yuling were quick to agree and bowed to Shen Shi, like they had a meeting with destiny. Han Xianpai awkwardly admitted she'd rather just work because hanging around would slow her sisters down. Han Xianpai said she had no cultivation method, calling herself useless and predicting she'd stay a laborer till she was too old to save her mom. Shen Shi asked Han Xianpai's age, recalling how he didn't teach her before out of fear of her mysterious past, but now, there was no reason to hold back. Han Xianpai nervously admitted she was 14. Shen Shi acknowledged 14 was kind of late, and Han Xianpai panicked a bit. He pointed out she should have started her golden core stage at 9-12. Han Xianpai's eyes watered as Shen Shi casually mentioned her meridians were almost set at 14, too late for her liking. Han Xianpai was stunned when Shen Shi patted her head, saying it wasn't too late thanks to her fire and would dual spiritual root. Shen Shi told her he'd teach her sect methods since she hadn't joined one before, and as long as she worked hard, nothing was impossible. Han Xianpai was all kinds of emotional at his words. She accepted Shen Shi as her master, remembering how people always mocked her. Han Xianpai thought back to when Shen Shi was top of the glorious Immortal Hall 4 years ago. Despite the snide remarks and her ragged clothes, Shen Shi had taken her hand and made her his disciple. Han Xianpai cried her eyes out, but Shen Shi reassured her it was all good, no need to cry. Xian Yu and Seng Yuling were stunned, with Xian Yu asking if this was really their master, and Seng Yuling wondering if he was always this gentle. Meanwhile, Dong Yuli smiled, remembering how Shen Shi used to be gentle, and now he was back. Someone muttered they were tired. It was Seng Yuling, complaining that early mornings and climbing to the peak were ruining her feet. Meanwhile, Xian Yu dumped a bucket of water on her. She insisted Shen Shi meant well, so Seng Yuling needed to stop whining. Han Xianpai declared she was off to watch the veggies down the mountain. Seng Yuling snuck behind Han Xianpai to grab her chest, asking if Shen Shi had been too harsh lately. Han Xianpai freaked out, telling her to stop messing around. Han Xianpai noted that Shen Shi not only taught her cultivation but also let her practice on his white jade hotbed, treating her like she was something special, so now she had to work extra hard and not let him down. Seng Yuling asked Xian Yu if she heard that Shen Shi was actually a softa like Dong Yuli said, or if he's just playing them. Xian Yu shrugged, saying she didn't know, but they both got rejected, Han Xianpai for her status, and her for not having enough spiritual juice. Xian Yu teased that Seng Yuling got turned down for being dumb. Seng Yuling snapped back, claiming she's actually the genius here. Xian Yu pointed out that Shen Shi, of all people, actually took them in as disciples. Han Xianpai walked down, thinking to herself that maybe Shen Shi really is a soft, good teacher after all. Han Xianpai paused, confused, seeing a group of people ahead. She walked up, asking who they were and if they had the token. One guy smirked, saying she forgot him already. Han Xianpai realized it was her senior brother, Zhao Huangming, and asked why he was here this time, remembering he'd come for Edelweiss not long ago. Zhao Huangming cleared it up, saying he wasn't here for Edelweiss, but because they lost 7 medicinal cranes and his master sent them to search for them. Han Xianpai was shocked to hear about the medicinal cranes. Zhao Huangming explained those cranes were crazy valuable blood and feathers like gold and important for their whole peak. He asked if Han Xianpai had seen one. Han Xianpai quickly looked away and denied it, making the guys wonder what was up. She remembered how Shen Shi praised her cooking skills. Turns out the crane was delicious, and guilt hit her as she lied about not seeing it, even though they'd eaten one. Han Xianpai suggested they go get the token, claiming her master was a ticking time bomb. In her head though, she was like, maybe I'll just stall and figure it out later. Zhao Huangming asked why Han Xianpai was being so stubborn. She apologized, claiming she wouldn't risk letting him go up without the token. Zhao Huangming lost it, calling her out for thinking she's something just because he called her junior sister, and accused her of acting like she had status when she didn't even know how to cultivate. Han Xianpai was caught off guard as Zhao Huangming lunged at her, threatening that she was asking for trouble. One of Zhao Huangming's friends told him to chill out, reminding him the peak master was Shen Shi. Zhao Huangming just grinned and went off, saying Shen Shi couldn't care less about his disciples, even beating them to death. He added that since Han Xianpai didn't even have a cultivation method, Shen Shi wouldn't bat an eye if she died. Han Xianpai shot Zhao Huangming a death glare. She blocked his attack like it was nothing. Zhao Huangming was shook at what just happened. Han Xianpai raised an eyebrow, asking if he was seriously about to fight at Airby Peak. Zhao Huangming gritted his teeth, fuming, wondering how the heck she blocked him. He muttered that he was already at the 3rd level of chi condensation and had held back, but still, there's no way she should have stopped him. He charged at Han Xianpai, accusing her of stealing Shen Shi's teachings and demanding to teach her a lesson instead. Han Xianpai panicked, admitting she was a beginner, but even if she died, she wouldn't let him trash Shen Shi's reputation. Shen Shi appeared out of nowhere, questioning Zhao Huangming if it was his place to teach his apprentice a lesson. Shen Shi's aura morphed into a giant hand, slapping Zhao Huangming into oblivion. Zhao Huangming was sent flying, crashing into his buddies, knocking everyone down like dominoes. Shen Shi praised Han Xianpai's skills, and she couldn't help but beam. Shen Shi sneered at Zhao Huangming and his group. Zhao Huangming out cold, his buddies immediately dropped to their knees, begging for Shen Shi's mercy. Shen Shi waved them off, saying they were just juniors and he wouldn't make it hard on them, send their master if there's an issue. As Zhao Huangming's crew carried him off, Shen Shi asked if Han Xianpai was okay. She reassured him she was fine. Shen Shi asked what the guys were up to, and Han Xianpai pointed out that he didn't even know what happened, yet they were still beating them. Moments later, someone watching the cranes mentioned that they'd been chilling where peach blossoms bloom, handling their own business for the month. Shen Shi was tense while Dong Yuli asked when the cranes were going to mate and hook him up with some crane eggs, envisioning profits from their hatchlings. Shen Shi sighed, puzzled it didn't add up. He'd eaten one crane, leaving 3 males and females, yet they weren't making progress. He shrugged and muttered, whatever. Shen Shi asked Dong Yuli if her foundation building realm was stable. Dong Yuli nodded, saying that Shen Shi's pill helped her break through and stabilize. Shen Shi passed her a book, saying it was time to learn spells now that her foundation was set, and with her mutated ice root, she should practice his spirit-level water technique. Flustered, Dong Yuli promised to practice hard, but inside, she was wondering why Shen Shi was taking so long. Her face flushed as she wondered why Shen Shi hadn't punished her yet. She couldn't take it anymore. At a conference, someone explained that the Immortal Sapling Conference was where sects chose the best candidates for immortal cultivation, and although Shangding Xianzong wasn't famous, it was rising fast, acting all righteous. With 2 masters attending, it was mentioned that allies Yuhua sect and Dongming Pavilion came to observe, knowing that new disciples can impact a sect's fate for decades. Shen Shi, lounging in his seat, casually remarked they should be careful in selection, but his disciples were more worried about his posture. Dong Yuli noted his sitting position was totally wrecking his reputation. Meanwhile, a lady noticed Shen Shi, and someone whispered, "That's Shen Shi of Shangding Xianzong." The lady, with a friend, remarked that Shen Shi was definitely an interesting character. Her friend laughed, asking Sister Luo if she was feeling some type of way about Shen Shi. Luo shrugged, saying if Shen Shi didn't have that sketchy past, she might have been down. Shen Shi's attention snapped to Luo out of nowhere. With a grin, Luo casually lifted her shirt and flashed Shen Shi. The masters were shook, faces red as tomatoes at what Luo just pulled off. Shen Shi, nose bleeding, played it cool, claiming it was just some charm stuff, while Xianyu freaked out about the blood. Wiping his nose, Shen Shi casually blamed the bleeding on overeating, while Tseng Yuling couldn't stop eyeing the girl, calling her amazing. Shen Shi asked what made Luo so amazing, and Tseng Yuling practically pointed at her chest to explain. Tseng Yuling said Luo's air-by peaks were top tier, better than Dong Yuli's and Xian Yu's, making the other masters spit out their drinks. Acting all cool, Shen Shi dissed the masters for being shallow, which made them seethe, wondering if he was even qualified to throw shade. Shen Shi casually dropped that. According to the plot, Shao Qi was about to make his grand entrance and slay the final test. When the test kicked off, one kid breezed through the obstacles while the others were stuck. A master up top noted he didn't expect to see such a solid talent pop out of this year's Immortal Sapling Conference. Deng Qing Peak's master added that the Iron Chain Bridge tests spiritual affinity, and the kid was so in sync, it seemed like the bridge was helping him. He'd never seen talent like it before, predicting unlimited potential. One master told the Patriarch it was pure luck for Shangding Xianzong, and another suggested that, with that talent, the kid should be under the Patriarch's direct guidance for top-tier training. The Patriarch told the elders to chill and said they needed to check out the kid's spiritual root attributes first. He admitted he wanted the kid as a disciple, but needed to check compatibility first. Maybe one of the elders or peak masters was a better fit. Shen Shi casually said they could enjoy the show for now and see if they still wanted that ace disciple later. The Patriarch sighed, admitting that while everyone else was fine, Shangding Xianzong owed Shen Shi because, despite his disciples passing the Immortal Sapling Conference, no peak masters or elders wanted them. By the rules, any kid who passes the levels and stands on the cloud platform becomes a disciple of Shangding Xianzong. But some elders and peak masters were picky, so Shen Shi took them in, saving the sect from embarrassment. Watching the kids, the Patriarch noted that if any other good seeds showed up, he'd have something to say to help Shen Shi take them in. Ning Xinming, the Patriarch, congratulated the kids for passing the test. The kids looked up as Ning Xinming announced that anyone standing on the cloud platform was officially a disciple of Shangding Xianzong. The elders were buzzing, and Ning Xunming added that after testing their spiritual roots, the kids would get assigned to the right master for their immortal cultivation journey. Ning Xunming called up the chosen ones to step forward and head to the formation in the center of the stage. Moments later, a kid stepped into the formation, and someone pointed out her triple spirit roots: water, wood, earth. Then asked if she was joining Di Qing Foam. She was like, sure, why not? Dong Yuli fed Shen Shi as he reclined, reminding him that he'd lose all the good disciples to the others if he didn't pay attention. Shen Shi shrugged, asking what the big deal was. I don't even want more disciples. Aren't a few enough? Zheng Yuling grinned, saying she knew the sect rumors calling Shen Shi the trash king who picks up trash disciples. Shen Shi, confused, wondered why she seemed so happy about it if it wasn't a compliment. Another kid stepped in the formation, and someone yelled, she's got a pure wood spirit root. Shen Shi immediately spotted Wei Qin, Shao Qi's first harem member, a foodie he totally won over with his food game. Ning Xunming asked if Shen Shi wanted the Woodroot kid as a disciple, thinking to himself that he didn't expect any good seeds besides Shao Qi, so might as well give her to Shen Shi. The elders were fuming, glaring at Shen Shi while silently cursing him. How could such a gem be handed to this cheap guy? Shen Shi waved it off, saying he wasn't interested. Better to give her to Taoist spy of Lingzhu Peak. Her jade bamboo skill was a perfect match for Wei Qin. In the plot, she was meant to be Bai Ran's disciple anyway. Bai Ran from Lingzhu Peak argued it was a no-go. Shen Shi was way stronger than her, so this gem couldn't be trusted to her. An elder jumped in, pointing out that Bai Ran's cultivation was still weak, only at the early Golden Dance stage, and Wei Qin was way too talented to be wasted. They had to figure out who'd take her seriously. Bai Ran sighed, admitting she wasn't strong enough and didn't have the clout in the sect to deserve such a talented disciple. Shen Shi snapped, asking what all the nonsense was about. If you want Wei Qin, take her, just teach her right. But if you think Bai Ran's more suited, then she's more suited. Who's with me, who's not? One elder was speechless, stunned by Shen Shi's boldness. Meanwhile, Bai Ran was genuinely touched by Shen Shi's words. Wei Qin stood next to Bai Ran when Shen Shi gestured for her to come over. Bai Ran was like, huh? A few moments later, Wei Qin's eyes sparkled and she started drooling when Shen Shi handed her food, asking if she was hungry. Eat it if you're hungry. Wei Qin took the food and looked at Bai Ran for approval. Bai Ran gave her the green light. As Wei Qin dug in, Shen Shi pinched her cheeks, saying she could enjoy his cakes but couldn't go kill Shao Qi with him. Wei Qin was totally confused. Bai Ran thanked Shen Shi. Shen Shi nodded, saying Bai Ran was the best teacher for Wei Qin. He was just being real. He smirked, thinking the real fun was about to begin. Shao Qi was summoned, stepping into the formation. As Shao Qi stood on stage, someone said he was the last to test. They weren't sure what spirit root he had but hoped he had water to become their disciple. Another elder joked about their long life and just stopped caring. Someone else said Ning Xunming would probably snatch him as a personal disciple anyway, so they could all shut up. Ning Xunming called out, telling Shao Qi to step forward. Shao Qi stepped up, greeting Ning Xunming right away. Ning Xunming thought Shao Qi's talent and calmness would guarantee a bright future with anyone. As Shao Qi stood in the array, it lit up around him. The elders waited, their eyes fixed on Shao Qi with eager anticipation. Shen Shi sneered, convinced no one would want Shao Qi as a disciple after this. A fire symbol popped up above Shao Qi's head out of nowhere. Ning Xunming felt a rush of excitement, seeing the fire element matching his own. The Dangqing Peak Master sighed, acknowledging that no one could compete with Ning Xunming for a fire-rooted disciple. Ning Xunming was ready to explain about Shao Qi's fire spiritual root but was interrupted before he could finish. Shao Qi froze in shock as the wood symbol appeared alongside the fire. Bai Ran noted the fire and wood roots, a decent combo, though not as impressive as just fire. Then, something caught her eye. Another symbol emerged, revealing fire, wood, and earth roots, which were quickly dismissed as mediocre qualifications. Ning Xunming sighed, lamenting the mediocre result. Shao Qi panicked, desperately scanning the surroundings in confusion. More symbols appeared, revealing a total of 5 spiritual roots. One elder smirked, declaring that Shao Qi was now revealed as a 5-element root, with no cultivation talent to speak of. Shao Qi trembled as whispers filled the air, mocking him for being a disappointment and wondering how he'd get off the stage after looking so sure of himself. Ning Xunming pointed out Shao Qi's lack of talent, but reminded them that, according to the rules, he still had 3 years. He then asked which elder might accept him. The master of Dangqing Peak fell into an uncomfortable silence. Bai Ran hesitated, but one elder grinned, saying that taking in such a talentless disciple would only make Shao-Chi the sex joke. Ning Xinming glanced toward Shen Shi, wondering if any fellow Taoist might take Shao-Chi on. Shen Shi fumed, thinking to himself that Ning Xinming might as well have just called him out by name. Shao-Chi's eyes welled up as others whispered he was too ordinary to be admitted to their sect. Shao-Chi's fist clenched as someone pointed out his lack of talent meant he didn't fit their rules and could be excluded. Suddenly, someone stepped in front of Shao-Chi, demanding his name. Shao-Chi looked up quickly, giving his name, ready for whatever came next. Shen Shi, seeing Shao-Chi cry, pointed out that boys need to man up, no tears on a grown man's face. Shao-Chi wiped his tears away, nodding along, agreeing. Shen Shi asked if Shao-Chi was ready to be his disciple. Shao-Chi eagerly agreed, without hesitation. Shao-Chi's voice echoed as he shouted, confirming he was in. Shen Shi smiled, telling Shao-Chi to remember, one day, the world will bow at his feet. Shao-Chi knelt, swearing to remember, and asked for Shen Shi's acceptance with a bow. Shen Shi turned, ready to leave the boring conference, motioning for Shao-Chi to follow. Shao-Chi followed without a word, while Shen Shi noted his favorability meter was maxed out. Shen Shi grinned, pleased that starting with SSR characters would rewrite his fate and ensure peace ahead. Shen Shi declared he'd end as an invincible villain, flowers scattering, leaving Shao-Chi baffled. Moments later, Air by Peak made it official, Shao-Chi was now one of them. Shen Shi commented that Shao-Chi's talent was lacking but believed he'd prove his strength, and Shao-Chi promised not to disappoint. Dong Yuli smiled, commenting that Shen Shi had taken a liking to Shao-Chi, the ultimate salted fish. Dong Yuli was shocked when Shen Shi handed Shao-Chi a chi-gathering pill, suggesting he take it slowly, one bit at a time, to boost his cultivation. Dong Yuli quickly interrupted, saying Shen Shi was off track. Shao-Chi was a newbie, no pills yet. Shen Shi casually replied that while clothes may help grow, Shao-Chi's pure body didn't need such crutches. Dong Yuli quickly admitted she'd spoken out of turn and asked for punishment, leaving Shen Shi speechless. Shen Shi shrugged it off, saying it didn't matter since Dong Yuli was just looking out for her younger brother. Dong Yuli asked why she hadn't been punished recently, wondering if she had done something wrong. Shen Shi, awkwardly, insisted she'd been doing great. Shao-Chi suddenly made a noise, grinning mischievously as he tried to grab their attention. Shen Shi and Dong Yuli froze as Shao-Chi called out to Shen Shi. Shen Shi sighed in relief while Dong Yuli fretted, realizing Shao-Chi was still there. Shen Shi then asked if Shao-Chi had something to say. Shao-Chi hesitated, then nervously revealed she was actually a girl, her real name being Shao-Chi Air. Shen Shi was utterly confused by Shao-Chi Air's confession. Someone at Air by Peak casually asked if Shao-Chi Air had any cultivation questions after being there a few days. Shen Shi sat there, Shao-Chi Air on his lap, explaining she got it all, just couldn't figure out how to sit properly for the body entry step. Shen Shi, all chill, told her not to stress there's no rush in cultivation. As Shao-Chi Air fidgeted on his lap, Shen Shi deadpanned, "Stop, you don't do it like that." She grinned, calling Shen Shi amazing for not being shocked she was a girl, meaning he'd figured out her disguise ages ago, right? Shen Shi casually said, "Your clan's fallen, bandits everywhere on your journey, so dressing as a guy was smart. Don't worry, I won't spill the beans." Meanwhile, in his head, Shen Shi was freaking out. Why is the male lead a girl now? Where's the plot going? Where's my harem? He muttered, can't keep the male lead's harem. Wait, maybe I can. Shao-Chi Air's low-key, so she's like an upgrade to the plot. A second later, Shen Shi pulled out a book, talking about how cultivators born deficient and blocked are actually transcendental. He told her, "You've got 5 elemental roots, so the chi thing's tough right now, but I got you. I'll fix it." Shen Shi declared he'd teach her all the cultivator rules, and Shao-Chi Air was all for it. Meanwhile, Han Xianpai was done cooking and told Dong Yuli she made 2 more of Shen Shi's fave dishes. Han Xianpai was stunned to see Dong Yuli blushing hard and totally spaced when she said Shen Shi would love it. Irritated, Han Xianpai wondered why Dong Yuli was acting all weird lately. Xianyu showed up with Seng Yuling, explaining she messaged Shen Shi, so he and Shao-Chi Air would be there soon. Seng Yuling sniffed and said, "It's time to eat, smells awesome." Seng Yuling drooled, talking about roasted cranes, while Xianyu, shocked, asked if it was charcoal grilled. Xianyu rushed to Han Xianpai, asking why she made a dish out of it when Shen Shi specifically told her to take care of it, making Han Xianpai sweat. Suddenly, Shen Shi and Shao-Chi Air walked in, and Xianyu was like, "Wait, what?" Both grinning, Shen Shi said he was starving after training with Shao Qi all morning. He added, I don't need food, golden core perks, but Han Xianpai's cooking? Top tier. Drooling, he added, especially the roasted crane. Can't forget that taste, while Han Xianpai and Xian Yu nervously exchanged glances. Shen Shi froze, cursing when he saw the roasted cranes, his precious ones, and 2 females at that. Shen Shi was shaking, mumbling about feeding those cranes snowdrops, hoping they'd make for profits. Shao Qi, snickering, asked Xian Yu if Shen Shi could even tell roasted crane genders, but Xian Yu shushed her, warning she shouldn't make him angrier. Shen Shi, fuming, yelled at his disciple, demanding to know who did this. In full rage mode, his disciples quickly dropped to their knees, bowing to avoid his wrath. Shen Shi exhaled deeply, trying to chill out. Shen Shi told everyone to get up and stop acting like scaredy cats, then wondered how a dumb crane could throw him off track. He wasn't supposed to care, but the whole violent character vibe kicked in. Someone yanked on his sleeve, confessing it was her fault. Shen Shi froze. Dong Yuli? She confessed it was her idea, blaming herself for catching the cranes, and told him to punish her. Dong Yuli dropped to her knees out of nowhere. Trembling with excitement, she begged for a savage punishment, making Shen Shi feel weird. Shen Shi was shook by her actions, cursing in his head. Dong Yuli was practically begging for the punishment, and Shen Shi thought, this is weird, but I guess I gotta punish her, but how do I do it? Shao Qi, out of nowhere, asked if Dong Yuli needed a spanking for the mess. Shen Shi immediately thought, great idea, nothing like humiliating her in front of the squad. Dong Yuli was stunned by the spanking talk, and Shen Shi vowed to be all chill from now on, keeping his cool, so he wouldn't ruin his good master rep. Shen Shi plopped down in a chair and told Dong Yuli to come over. She shook her head and obeyed. He ordered her to lie down, and she quickly complied. Dong Yuli shook with anticipation as Shen Shi gave her but a full-on stare. Shen Shi noted how Dong Yuli's body was a whole different vibe compared to Shao Qi's lowly self. Shen Shi raised his hand, reminding himself to stay composed. He kept telling himself to stay in control, or his good master vibe would be totally ruined. He spanked her, and she let out a loud moan. Shen Shi, stone-faced, said as the eldest disciple, Dong Yuli messed up, so she was getting a proper punishment, and the others better take notes. Shen Shi kept going with the spanking. Tears welled up as she shuddered, moaning loudly. The other disciples were freaking out, and Dong Yuli, moaning away, admitted she messed up, asking Shen Shi for a harsher punishment in front of her junior sisters. Shen Shi was exhausted, his hand practically smoking, but Dong Yuli was all satisfied, melting in his lap. Shen Shi finally realized Dong Yuli's an M. She stayed even after the abuse, and back then, he never thought about why. Maybe it was heaven's way of fixing the plot, but he wasn't a fan of the setup. Shen Shi, exhausted, floated away, telling everyone to eat the roast crane without him, while muttering that heaven really loved to mess with him. Xian Yu and Sang Yuling freaked out, and Xian Yu rushed to ask if Dong Yuli was alright. Dong Yuli's shaky voice freaked everyone out, but she reassured them and called Xian Yu over. Leaning in, Dong Yuli whispered that she needed new underwear, leaving Xian Yu speechless. Xian Yu dashed off, promising to return soon. Meanwhile, Sang Yuling asked Han Xianpai what was up with Dong Yuli, but she had no clue. Shao Qi was eyeing Dong Yuli with full attention. Blushing, Shao Qi started giggling to herself. Shen Shi took a deep breath. While bathing, Shen Shi thought that Dong Yuli was holding it together in front of the junior sisters lately, but behind closed doors, she was taking it a bit far. Shen Shi jumped when someone called out to him, asking if he'd summoned them. It was Dong Yuli, and Shen Shi almost jumped out of his skin. He reminded her he didn't need help with his bath. Dong Yuli ignored him and said teaching every day must be exhausting, so she'd help him wash his back. Shen Shi freaked out as Dong Yuli climbed into the bath. He frantically told her to get out. Dong Yuli froze, calling out to Shen Shi shyly. Shen Shi seriously told her to stop, reminding her he'd already said he didn't need help, so she should leave. Instead of listening, Dong Yuli did the opposite, jumping into the bath and refusing to follow Shen Shi's request. Dong Yuli asked with a mischievous grin if she should be punished for her disobedience. Shen Shi was stunned, thinking this world was too wild. Who could deal with a disciple like her? Shen Shi glanced at Dong Yuli and wondered if he'd get more views if his novel had these kinds of scenes. Shen Shi was speechless, staring at Dong Yuli as she got closer. Just as things got awkward, Shao Qi called out to Shen Shi, saying she needed advice on something. Panicking, Dong Yuli asked what she should do. Shen Shi laughed bitterly, mocking her question. Shen Shi asked why Dong Yuli hadn't thought of the consequences and told her to hide in the closet. Dong Yuli quickly agreed, rushing to hide and asking Shen Shi not to tell anyone she was there. While Dong Yuli hid in the closet, Shen Shi wondered what kind of storyline this was. Shen Shi sighed, cleaning up the water on the floor and thinking he should get rid of the water on Dong Yuli's body too, or she'd catch a cold. Xiao Qi'er bounced in, calling out to Shen Shi, announcing her grand entrance like she owned the place. Xiao Qi'er scanned the room like she was planning a heist, and Shen Shi, half baffled, asked why she was popping in so late. Xiao Qi'er, casually mentioning his bath, said she needed help with some questions. Shen Shi sighed, telling her she doesn't need to overdo it, she can't even refine qi yet. No need for brain overload. Xiao Qi'er played it off like she didn't expect that, but her eyes, totally glued to the closet. Shen Shi tensed up, wondering if Xiao Qi'er had X-ray vision, or if she was just suspiciously eyeing the closet. Inside the closet, Dong Yuli was sweating bullets while Xiao Qi'er, oblivious, went off about working harder and mentioned she'd wanted to ask Dong Yuli, but where'd she vanish to? Shen Shi asked what she needed help with, but Xiao Qi'er, in no rush, said she'd pour him some tea first. Meanwhile, Dong Yuli was still hiding like her life depended on it. Dong Yuli squeezed herself into the tiny closet, complaining it was a sauna in there. She sniffed Shen Shi's clothes, noting that the whole closet smelled like him way too much, honestly. Dong Yuli was practically melting in there, muttering that if Xiao Qi'er didn't leave soon, her cover was blown. But she couldn't deny it, Shen Shi's scent was all around her, and it was overwhelming. And it wasn't exactly helping her focus. The closet started creaking, and Shen Shi's heart nearly stopped. He whispered, asking what she was up to, but got nothing in return. Xiao Qi'er bounced back in with a cup of tea like nothing weird was happening. She tripped over a chair, sending the tea flying in slow motion. Xiao Qi'er, grinning like a villain, hinted that once Shen Shi's clothes got wet, she'd be the one to help him with a wardrobe change. Shen Shi stared, horrified, as tea came crashing down toward him like a slow-motion disaster. Somehow, Shen Shi managed to freeze the tea mid-air while grabbing Xiao Qi'er like some sort of acrobatic ninja. Shen Shi, deadpan, advised her to be careful because, almost drowning him in tea was a bold move. Then Xiao Qi'er just hugged him, apologizing for her clumsiness, as if this was a normal thing to do, and babbling about how lucky his clothes didn't get wet. Shen Shi, a bit too pale, reassured her it was fine, but said she should watch where she's going next time. In his head, though, he was pretty sure she'd done that on purpose. Then Xiao Qi'er casually placed her hand over his chest, like she wasn't already crossing all kinds of lines. Xiao Qi'er gave him a puppy dog look, saying she'd totally follow his orders because, he's the best obviously. Shen Shi, visibly uncomfortable, muttered something about her being too young to understand, but also, probably not. Under the moonlight, Xiao Qi'er casually said she was heading back. Shen Shi, drained, grumbled that Xiao Qi'er's endless rambling almost knocked him out, even with his golden core stage stamina. Sitting down, Shen Shi sighed, annoyed by Xiao Qi'er's antics, hoping Dong Yuli was okay after being stuck in the closet forever. Shen Shi opened the closet and froze, speechless at the sight. Dong Yuli, drenched in sweat, was clutching one of his shirts, gasping for air. Flustered, Shen Shi turned away, asking if the closet was too much for her, warning her next time it wouldn't just be the closet. Dong Yuli crawled out, asking what other punishments he had in mind. Shen Shi screamed, and she casually listed tortures she was willing to endure whatever he liked. Shen Shi nodded, telling her to change clothes quickly so she didn't leave a bad impression on her juniors. Dong Yuli nodded in agreement. As Dong Yuli searched for clothes, Shen Shi sipped his tea, commenting that the place was too dangerous, he'd fail the trial next time if he stayed here. Shen Shi called Dong Yuli, telling her he'd be leaving the mountain soon and to prep some things for him. They needed to cultivate in preparation for the sect event in 6 months. Dong Yuli asked why Shen Shi was suddenly leaving the mountain. Shen Shi said he was off to find something, noting that the cranes nearly ate the snowdrops. He needed to grab the main character's cheats before anything else changed. The next day, outside Xiangding Xianzong, the sun was shining and the weather was perfect. Shen Shi walked alone, thinking this was the first time he'd left the sect since coming to this world, but the destination was close, so he might as well walk. A bunch of carriages rolled by, guarded by a group of men. One of the men called out to the madam inside, asking if they should stop by the stream ahead and rest. The man, Commander Gao, was told by the madam to let everyone rest by the roadside. They'd been traveling non-stop for 3 days, and people were exhausted. Moments later, some men stood guard while others prepared to rest. Suddenly, a delicious smell wafted through the air. One man sniffed and asked what it was, while the other drooled. Meanwhile, someone was grilling and bragging that cumin lamb kebabs were the best. Finding cumin seeds down the ravine was totally worth it, just one thing left to do. It was Shen Shi, pouring his soul into the barbecue as he expertly sprinkled spices. The men instantly recognized the kebab as lamb, but Commander Gao stayed wary of Shen Shi. An old man stepped out of one carriage, assuring them Shen Shi wasn't a cultivator, so no worries. Commander Gao sighed in relief, but was confused when someone handed him a golden leaf from another carriage. Shen Shi blew on a kebab, eyeing the group. He noted one guy was in the foundation building stage, but his spiritual energy was all over the place and already spent, definitely no threat. Commander Gao strolled up, all polite and stuff, introducing himself as Gao Xing, Muling Castle's big guard boss. Shen Shi cut to the chase, asking Gao Xing what was up. Gao Xing threw a compliment about the skewers, then asked if 3 for a gold leaf was cool with Shen Shi. Shen Shi laughed, saying 3 skewers for a gold leaf was a joke, and that they could just take what they wanted. Gao Xing grinned, thanking Shen Shi for the hookup, saying his crew was about to eat like kings. A bit later, the sky went dark, and a campfire popped up. Shen Shi stretched, thinking it was a good time to dip. Out of nowhere, 2 ladies rolled up, calling him little brother. Shen Shi turned red, thinking they were total knockouts, wondering if they were sisters, or mother-daughter vibes. But then, Shen Shi frowned, asking which lady thought he was the little one. The younger lady tried not to laugh, while the older one looked confused. The older lady kept calling him little brother, saying his skewers were destiny. She introduced herself as Luo Sha from Muling Castle, with her daughter Yuting, and asked for his name. Shen Shi dropped the cultivators don't reveal names line, adding his Taoist name was Jingzhe. Luo Sha was shook, apologizing quickly, thinking his Taoist name was fishy and probably made up. The guy was too careful. She asked if Shen Shi was in a hurry to go somewhere. Shen Shi confirmed, ready to leave now, catching Luo Sha off guard. Luo Sha looked a little troubled, while Yuting was barely holding in her giggles. Shen Shi remembered something, mentioning he was heading to Duanli Mountain, asking if Luo Sha could give him a lift if it was convenient. Luo Sha and Yuting freaked out a bit, but Luo Sha agreed, as long as Shen Shi didn't mind. A little later, everyone was camped out by the stream. While getting ready for bed, Yuting asked why Luo Sha invited Shen Shi along, especially after the elder said he wasn't a cultivator. Luo Sha shrugged, saying Shen Shi was weird but she couldn't figure him out, so he had to be special. Plus, no harm in tagging him along. She added that Shen Shi was heading to Duanli Mountain, aka the Demon Mountain, where no one's ever come back alive. If you weren't strong, you wouldn't even try it. Yuting hugged Luo Sha, asking if they'd be safe from joining Yuhua sect if Shen Shi was a legit expert. She didn't want to be separated, but Luo Sha called her a silly child and said wishes don't always come true. Yuting joked that if Shen Shi really was that good, she'd marry him and their castle would never get bullied again. Shen Shi sneezed out of nowhere. Gao Xing freaked out, suggesting Shen Shi crash in his tent to avoid catching a cold since he had night watch. Shen Shi casually declined, saying he doesn't sleep, and then asked why they were headed to Yuhua Mountain. Gao Xing explained that Muling Castle used to be a big deal, with immortals bowing and even the Jade Kingdom giving respect. But once their ancestor died, it all went downhill. He added that Luo Sha had been holding the fort, or else they would have been taken down by enemies. Now, they were going to Yuhua Mountain to see about joining an immortal sect, hoping Yuting could get in. Shen Shi asked if that was the Yuhua sect. Shen Shi remembered Lu and drooled, realizing it was that huge sect. Shen Shi asked about Gao Xing's master. Gao Xing sighed and said his master died young before Luo Sha showed up. They never met, and Yuting was just a kid she adopted, well known in Jianghu. Shen Shi figured they were a mother-daughter duo with a lot to carry, and despite avoiding trouble, jackals would still come. Realizing he'd stepped into a mess, he told Gao Xing to wake everyone up for a fight. Gao Xing was surprised, asking what Shen Shi had just said. Shen Shi casually pointed out that 300 paces away, a bunch of enemies, including cultivators, were heading their way. Gao Xing yelled for everyone to get ready and stay alert for the upcoming fight. When the guys confirmed they were all up, Shen Shi shrugged, saying fate was calling, so he'd help out a bit. A bunch of guys charged in the same direction. Weapons in hand, one guy shouted they'd kill, and another urged them to go. Luo Shasha looked a bit nervous but assured everyone to stay calm, saying the ambush meant the enemies weren't confident enough for a direct fight. She turned to Shen Shi, telling him to follow them, then reassured Yu Ting not to be scared. Shen Shi smirked, noting how, even now, Luo Shasha was trying to protect someone she barely knew. Shen Shi turned to Yu Ting, speechless seeing her nervousness. Shen Shi muttered to himself, deciding he'd protect them both since it was fate. As the fight went on, Shen Shi realized it didn't matter if the mortals won. What mattered was when the cultivators would make their move. Out of nowhere, a fiery arrow shot towards Shen Shi and Yu Ting. He quickly warned them. The elder scoffed, saying it was just a random cultivator. He released his aura while chilling on top of the carriage. A flying sword sliced the arrow in two. Luo Shasha thanked Elder Bai for his help. Fiery arrows shot from the woods at blinding speed. Elder Bai raised his hand, summoning his aura. He formed an aura orb, blocking the arrows. Elder Bai gestured, sending his flying sword forward. His flying sword darted into the woods, targeting hidden attackers. A cultivator above scoffed, dismissing Elder Bai as a low-level fighter despite his earlier boasts. Elder Bai kept fighting with his flying sword. Elder Bai spotted the cultivator above and demanded his identity. The masked cultivator dismissed Elder Bai as a hired hand, offering to spare him if he stayed out of the way. A man emerged, greeting Luo Shasha with a creepy compliment about her looks. Luo Shasha recognized Lei Kai and accused him of orchestrating the chaos from Mu Ling Castle. Lei Kai admitted he wanted both the estate and Luo Shasha, mocking her past rejection. Luo Shasha turned to Elder Bai but hesitated. Elder Bai shook his head, conceding he couldn't beat Lei Kai. Shen Shi stepped forward, deciding to intervene. Luo Shasha stopped Shen Shi, leaving him speechless. Luo Shasha urged Shen Shi to leave when he could, as he was only involved because of them. Luo Shasha offered herself and Mu Ling Castle to Lei Kai in exchange for Yu Ting and Shen Shi's safety. Lei Kai's laugh made Luo Shasha and Yu Ting uneasy. Lei Kai praised Luo Shasha's beauty, comparing her to a celestial being. Lei Kai smirked, refusing to let Luo Shasha go after confirming her beauty. Elder Bai scoffed, deciding to help one last time despite the odds. Elder Bai aimed his flying sword at Lei Kai, who suddenly looked worried. Lei Kai's sidekick tossed an aura rope at Elder Bai, calling him out for being way too cocky. Elder Bai clenched his teeth, realizing he was now tied up like a birthday present. Lei Kai panicked as the sword got closer, yelling for his buddy to save him ASAP. The cultivator sighed, muttering about how much of a hassle this whole situation was. Lei Kai's jaw dropped as the ground shot up, blocking the sword like a last-minute save in a video game. Lei Kai froze as the sword pierced the ground shield, stopping just inches from his face. Lei Kai, in a panic, grabbed the sword's blade like it was a hot potato. Fuming, Lei Kai crushed the sword and vowed revenge, muttering about how close he'd come to becoming a kebab. Elder Bai sighed and shook his head, officially tapping out. Shen Shi raised an eyebrow as Luo Shasha slipped him a talisman like it was a cheat code. Shen Shi stopped her, telling her to save the seal since he had things under control. Luo Shasha blushed as Shen Shi casually dropped that he wasn't exactly a spring chicken. Yu Ting, still in Shen Shi's grip, looked confused by his cryptic comment. Lei Kai smirked, calling Shen Shi a brat and demanding to know where he'd crawled out from. The cultivator side-eyed Shen Shi, staying quiet but clearly sweating bullets. Shen Shi just stared Lei Kai down like he was deciding how to end him. Shen Shi unleashed a dark aura so intense it could have been a villain origin story. Lei Kai's knees hit the ground as his body shook like a leaf in a hurricane. The cultivator trembled, mentally cursing and calling Shen Shi senior, begging for mercy like his life depended on it. Shen Shi stayed silent, his aura so oppressive the cultivator felt like he was drowning in bad vibes. Yu Ting realized that despite all the chaos she'd seen, Shen Shi's presence made her feel oddly safe like he was the ultimate life hack. Luo Shasha leaned on Shen Shi, wondering if it was finally okay to let someone else handle the mess for once. Luo Shasha called Shen Shi Lord and thanked him, making it sound way more dramatic than necessary. Shen Shi brushed it off, saying calling him Lord was a bit extra, even for him. Luo Shasha switched to Young Master, still laying it on thick with her gratitude. Shen Shi found the Young Master title amusing but brushed it off, focusing on the next move. Fang Daiquan blurted out his name, dropped his master's title, and begged Shen Shi to spare him, promising treasures and claiming Lei Kai was just some guy he barely knew. Lei Kai called out Fang Daquan for ditching him after taking his family's precious lotus seed. Fang Daquan shot back, calling Lei Kai a liar and denying he ever took the lotus seed. Fang Daquan yeeted his sword at Lei Kai, who freaked out. Lei Kai froze like a deer in headlights. Shen Shi casually snapped the sword in two like it was a twig. Fang Daquan coughed up blood and collapsed, clutching his chest. Shen Shi asked if Fang Daquan thought he was allowed to move. Fang Daquan begged Shen Shi to chill, mentally questioning what kind of OP sword he was dealing with. Shen Shi explained his jade bamboo sword was his main, but the blue lake sword was his secret weapon, basic but effective in this noob zone. Shen Shi mused that if not for plot armor, he'd have wrecked Shao Qi already, and now everyone should be terrified of him. Fang Daquan denied taking the lotus seed, accusing Lei Kai of setting him up. Shen Shi decided to play the villain, announcing a 20-breath race to hand over the lotus seed for mercy. Fang Daquan smirked like a cartoon villain, while Lei Kai started sweating bullets. Fang Daquan lunged at Lei Kai, oblivious to the arrows headed his way. Fang Daquan groaned as Lei Kai's arrows hit him, leaving him shocked. Fang Daquan collapsed mid-sentence, his villain monologue cut short. Lei Kai handed over the lotus seed, trying to play it cool like he just found it. Shen Shi pointed out there were still 5 breaths left, plenty of time for chaos. Fang Daquan stabbed Lei Kai from behind, leaving him coughing up blood. Fang Daquan mocked Lei Kai for thinking their power levels were even close. Fang Daquan handed the seed to Shen Shi, who accepted it and spared him for now. Fang Daquan started thanking Shen Shi, but Bai Ji Shui cut him off literally. Blood spilled as Bai Ji Shui casually recalled his sword, like it was just another Tuesday. Luo Sha apologized for overstepping, but Shen Shi shrugged it off, saying he only promised not to kill Fang Daquan, so dying by her hand wasn't his problem, and he wasn't going to sweat the small stuff. Bai Ji Shui handed over the item that had restrained him earlier, calling it Fang Daquan's treasure. Shen Shi raised an eyebrow, recognizing it as the earth-binding lock, the highest grade of spirit. He explained he'd removed the prohibitions and divine thoughts so Bai Ji Shui could keep it, but to be careful, or it could kill him. Bai Ji Shui realized the value when the prohibitions were gone and refused, saying it was too much to take. Shen Shi cut him off, saying enough with the talk, he wasn't into that, and since he'd already helped them, he'd fulfilled his destiny and had other stuff to do, so he was out. He said his aura screamed top expert and sage, so they shouldn't get too obsessed, he was just a legend. Yu Ting suddenly shouted for Shen Shi to wait up. Yu Ting asked if he was still heading to Duanli Mountain, and invited him to join them in the carriage. Luo Sha added they hadn't properly thanked him yet, so they could chat on the way. Shen Shi looked unsure and stayed quiet. After a beat, he shrugged and agreed. A few moments later, Luo Sha and her crew were on the road. Inside the carriage, Yu Ting and Luo Sha were flustered, and Yu Ting called out to Shen Shi. They both fed him, and he commented it was sweet. Shen Shi casually mentioned he'd heard Luo Sha plan to send Yu Ting to the Yuhua sect to be a disciple. Luo Sha confirmed, and Bai Ji Shui added that Yu Ting had solid talent, so she should grab the opportunity while young. Yu Ting joked she'd soon be 14, the age when most girls get married. Shen Shi noted she wasn't a little girl anymore, glancing at her chest. Shen Shi pointed out Bai Ji Shui was just a casual cultivator who didn't know much, and since Yuhua sect was female-dominated, it seemed safer to send Yu Ting there. He added that the Yuhua sect practiced dual cultivation. Yu Ting asked what dual cultivation was, and Shen Shi replied it wasn't for kids, he'd explain later. He said she should let him check her aptitude first. Yu Ting agreed. A moment later, Yu Ting mentioned something warm entering her body, feeling hot but also really comfortable. Shen Shi told Yu Ting to stay still since it'd be over soon, while Luo Sha got flustered watching them. Moments later, Yu Ting was completely out of it when it was done. Shen Shi stared intently at the disoriented Yu Ting on his lap. He pointed out that Yu Ting had a rare, empty spiritual root, the kind you don't see every day. Shen Shi mulled over the empty spiritual root. He casually mentioned that while 5 spiritual roots make you mortal, an empty one, that's like being born with immortality on the cards, able to store energy effortlessly and avoid all those pesky limits. But he quickly added that the empty root has no attributes, meaning Yu Ting could only use energy to boost her health, not exactly ideal for major power moves. In the cultivation world, people with this constitution usually end up becoming the ultimate battery. Basically, she'd be a top-tier power source for any sect that wants to break through and get even stronger, definitely something that'll drive people wild. Yu Ting asked how her talents were looking. Shen Shi said she had decent potential and casually asked if she wanted to be his disciple. Yu Ting was caught off guard by his offer. She didn't hesitate. Of course. He nodded, reminding her that as his disciple now, she better listen up for what came next. First rule, don't tell anyone you're a cultivator ever. Second, he wouldn't teach her all the time, but he'd give her goals to hit. Third, if things got too rough, she could reach him anytime via a messenger stone, and he'd help out. Shen Shi checked if she understood, and she immediately called him master with a quick yes. Shen Shi grinned, feeling pretty good about having a normal, cute disciple like Yu Ting. He joked that it was a nice change from home, where it's just chaos with an M, a schemer, a giant baby, and a boy. Cultivation was a struggle there. He told Luo Sha that Yu Ting's special constitution could bring disaster if exposed, so she absolutely had to keep her cultivation under wraps. Luo Sha agreed it was dangerous. Shen Shi reassured her, saying not to worry, he had it covered and even had a backup plan. Shen Shi signaled for Bai Jishui. Bai Jishui asked what Shen Shi needed him to do. Shen Shi pointed out that Bai Jishui's technique was incomplete, draining his life. Even though foundation cultivators live up to 200 years, his time was running out, so it was time to strike a deal. Bai Jishui admitted there was no fooling Shen Shi and asked what he could do. Shen Shi handed over a Yuanling pill, explaining it'd extend Bai Jishui's life by 10 years and boost his cultivation to help him break through. In total, that could give him an extra 100 years. Bai Jishui was completely shocked by the offer. He quickly pledged his loyalty, saying it was like a second shot at life, and whatever Shen Shi asked, he'd do it without hesitation. Shen Shi agreed, saying Bai Jishui had 10 years to protect Muling Castle, and when called upon, he must help without question. Bai Jishui immediately agreed. Luo Sha teased that Yu Ting dodged a bullet, no need for the Yuhua sect, and they wouldn't be separated, so better listen up to her new master. Yu Ting pointed out that immortals don't care about rules. Masters and disciples could totally be a couple, or even siblings, if they wanted. Luo Sha raised an eyebrow, asking what Yu Ting was on about, and Shen Shi awkwardly cleared his throat. Shen Shi was left speechless, awkwardly stuck in the moment. Yu Ting asked when Shen Shi'd return, while Luo Sha marveled at how effortlessly he disappeared and reappeared. Shen Shi thought to himself, am I accidentally creating a harem every time I take on disciples? Shen Shi casually mentioned that Bai Jishui had agreed to guard Muling Castle, so they were pretty much untouchable now. Luo Sha noted that Bai Jishui was a top-tier cultivator, so convincing him to leave the mountain wasn't exactly easy. She wondered how Shen Shi had convinced Bai Jishui so easily. Shen Shi, unfazed, said no need to go to Yuhua sect any more time to head back, but he'd visit Muling Castle soon. Yu Ting leaned in, eyes fixed on Shen Shi, calling him her master. Shen Shi told her not to stare so much, it wasn't his real face, but he'd let her take a peek before he left. Shen Shi started peeling off his disguise, and both Luo Sha and Yu Ting were glued to the reveal. As he revealed his true face, Shen Shi praised Yu Ting for being a solid disciple, reminding her to keep up with her cultivation, and he'd check in on her soon. Luo Sha and Yu Ting were in full shock mode, mouths hanging open as they gawked at Shen Shi. Shen Shi zipped out of the carriage and flew off toward his next stop. Shen Shi muttered to himself, frustrated he'd wasted time he needed to pick up the pace. He murmured, I should get there in 2 days, no problem. After days of travel, Shen Shi arrived at Duanli Mountain, calling it ominous. No one lived within 100 miles, just poisonous snakes, beasts, and the Qinglin poisonous toad with nascent soul-level strength. Shen Shi noted the 5-element fruit could boost a cultivator's spiritual root and even turn nascent soul-level beasts into humans. He figured the Qinglin toad was guarding the fruit, waiting for it to ripen. Shen Shi wasn't interested in the fruit. He was after the 5-element stone buried beneath the tree, perfect for balancing the elements and helping Shaoqi air. He figured he'd wait for the toad to leave before grabbing it. Less drama, more efficiency. Day 1, the Qinglin toad stood guard by the tree, while Shen Shi casually chilled on the grass. Day 2, same story, Qinglin toad guarding the tree, Shen Shi still waiting. Day N, the toad was still guarding, and Shen Shi was now flat on the ground, defeated. Shen Shi grumbled that the toad was eating, sleeping, and doing nothing just like him. He wondered if he should just kill it and be done with it. He sighed, mumbling that killing it wouldn't be the cool way to go. His dignity was at stake. Realizing his talent for illusions, he figured he'd use that since the toad seemed as lazy as him. Out of nowhere, a female toad croaked to grab the guy's attention. Shen Shi's female toad flashed a smile at the male, luring him in. The male toad was shook seeing her. The female toad worked her magic, flashing a grin at him. The male toad took off after her, and Shen Shi couldn't help but celebrate. Shen Shi chuckled, thinking the toad was a true believer, instinctively following the plan so he didn't need to use his poison trick. He muttered, hoping the toad didn't finish the chase too quickly. Out of nowhere, someone shouted at the toad to keep an eye on them. The toad croaked and rushed back, leaving Shen Shi confused. The toad froze in shock seeing Shen Shi, who stood there speechless. The toad cursed, demanding Shen Shi's death. Shen Shi swiftly drew his sword from the water. Shen Shi asked, confused, why the toad was so mad. He quickly unleashed his stepping wave move. The toad taunted, calling Shen Shi just a puny golden core cultivator who didn't know his place. But the toad couldn't finish as Shen Shi's attack sent him flying, blood spurting out. The toad crashed into a rock, completely confused. He shouted in disbelief, wondering if human cultivators were really that strong now. The toad was speechless as he realized Shen Shi just kept using his stepping wave. Shen Shi fumed, wondering who the jerk was that ruined his moment and whether they were screaming from fear of an ambush. The toad groaned, feeling the pressure, realizing if a golden core cultivator was this strong, a nascent soul attack would flatten him and the whole mountain. He added, well, if I'm going to die, I'll die with some dignity. The toad fired an aura straight at the fiery lotus heading his way. Their attacks collided, exploding in a massive burst. Shen Shi cursed mentally, wondering if that epic move with all its spiritual pressure just vanished like that. Out of nowhere, a stunning girl showed up, impressed that the toad broke her lotus with some actual skill. But she made it clear no way was she letting the 5-element fruit slip away today. Shen Shi recognized her as Yu Wu Shuang, the genius from Tai Yun Immortal Sect, daughter of the sect leader. The toad sighed, realizing human cultivators were still the same. He'd clearly been wrong earlier. The toad shot his sharp auras at Yu Wu Shuang. Yu Wu Shuang unleashed her scorching phoenix cry. She swiftly dodged the toad's attack. The toad taunted, asking if she was already scared and daring to steal his treasure. Yu Wu Shuang scoffed, saying she didn't need the fire phoenix for the toad. She added that she could handle it solo. Meanwhile, Shen Shi was confused, wondering why she summoned the phoenix. Was it for show? Back to the action, the toad launched more sharp auras at her. Yu Wu Shuang moved fast, dodging and telling the toad to take her hit instead. Suddenly, she saw one of the toad's auras heading straight for her. She yanked her clothes out of the way, exclaiming it was too close. Her clothes almost got wrecked. Shen Shi was speechless, muttering that he couldn't watch anymore. This was the most mind-numbing battle ever. The toad scoffed, calling her a dumb human. Yu Wu Shuang shot back, accusing the toad of being despicable for using poison. As the poison spread, she realized this wasn't good. The toad bragged, claiming even a god transformation cultivator would be weakened by his Qing Lin poison, laughing as he said it. The toad stretched his tongue, aiming to snatch Yu Wu Shuang. Yu Wu Shuang panicked as the toad restrained her, and he muttered, wondering what a nascent soul cultivator would taste like. Suddenly, Shen Shi hit with his stepping wave move. The toad asked if it was that move again, scoffing that he wasn't scared anymore, he was just careless earlier. But the toad was sent flying again, crashing into a rock after Shen Shi's hit. The toad yelled, calling Shen Shi a bastard, asking where his martial values went with this ambush. The toad fired off his Qing Lin poison gas blast, telling Shen Shi to take it. Shen Shi hit him with his stepping wave again. The toad cursed as Shen Shi's attack sliced through his, asking if that was the only move he knew. Shen Shi shrugged it off. He claimed it was his real stepping wave. Shen Shi swung another stepping wave. Yu Wu Shuang watched as Shen Shi swung his sword with pure power in front of her. This time, Shen Shi's stepping wave hit way harder than before. The toad shook in fear, realizing just how powerful Shen Shi's attack was. He asked, "How is that even possible?" Shen Shi said he wasn't going to kill the toad, just stay out of his way. The toad quickly thanked him for sparing his life. Shen Shi sighed, saying he could have handled it easily if this silly Yu Wu Shuang hadn't interfered and avoided all this messy drama. Yu Wu Shuang politely asked Shen Shi if he could spare some 5-element fruit, promising to pay any price. Shen Shi smirked, asking what if he didn't want to sell, and teased Yu Wu Shuang for always wanting whatever she thought was good. Yu Wu Shuang turned bright red at Shen Shi's comment. She offered 5 5th-grade elixirs for a single fire-element fruit. The toad asked if she was serious, saying she could have just told him the price, and he would have handed over all 5 fruits, so why fight? Shen Shi explained that the toad wanted the fruit for transformation, and the best elixir from it was only 5th grade. But Yu Wu Shuang was offering 5 5th grade elixirs for just 1. As expected from Yu Wu Shuang, Shen Shi thought. Shen Shi wondered why his ex, Yu Wu Shuang, still hadn't improved. Yu Wu Shuang started pulling something out of her bag. She casually showed him an item, asking if it was enough. The toad freaked out, recognizing it as the Winter Mountain Spirit Stone. Yu Wu Shuang quickly stopped him, saying she couldn't give that one. She pulled out another item, and the toad immediately recognized it as Cloud Hidden Jade. The toad sent a telepathic message, suggesting they team up, take Yu Wu Shuang's stuff, and even poison her if Shen Shi wanted. Shen Shi told the toad to shut up if it wanted to keep living. The toad croaked, obeying. Shen Shi snapped at Yu Wu Shuang, telling her to stop pulling out stuff and asking if anyone warned her about being careful outside. Yu Wu Shuang sheepishly admitted she had snuck out. Shen Shi wondered why he felt like he was the victim here. He gestured toward the 5-element tree, motioning for her to head there. Shen Shi used his aura to pluck the 5-element fruits from the tree. As soon as they were gathered, he snatched them up behind his back. Yu Wu Shuang sighed, defeated, watching Shen Shi's quick moves. But Shen Shi reassured her, telling her not to sigh. He'd give her the fruits, leaving Yu Wu Shuang shocked. Yu Wu Shuang asked, wide-eyed, if he was really going to give her the fruits. Shen Shi warned Yu Wu Shuang not to flaunt her wealth outside, or she'd attract trouble, no matter how strong her backing was. Take the fruit and head home, he advised. Yu Wu Shuang was stunned by Shen Shi's advice. As she saw through Shen Shi's disguise, he urged her to hurry and take the fruit. Yu Wu Shuang thought about Shen Shi again, noting how this guy reminded her of him, always showing off, acting like an idiot, and standing in her way. She insisted she couldn't take his stuff for free and told him to name his price, promising anything he wanted. Shen Shi casually said the fruit wasn't that valuable and asked for 1 transformation elixir and an ingot of Deluo gold. Yu Wu Shuang raised an eyebrow at the mention of Deluo gold, asking if Shen Shi was not only powerful but also a skilled refiner. Impressive. Shen Shi modestly said he only knew a bit. Yu Wu Shuang handed him the transformation pill, saying she didn't have refining materials on hand but could send them later. She gave him the mother sword of the channeling jade sword, explaining she'd send the materials through the child's sword when she got back to the sect. Shen Shi smirked, saying the channeling jade sword was already worth more than both the fruit and the elixir combined. Yu Wu Shuang introduced herself as being from the Taiyan Immortal sect, promising to repay Shen Shi generously for saving her life. She added that the jade sword could also be used to contact her anytime. Shen Shi casually introduced himself as Qianren, just a regular cultivator. Yu Wu Shuang said she'd head off first but reminded Shen Shi to contact her. Shen Shi chuckled, calling her a silly girl. Shen Shi suddenly told the toad to leave if he wasn't interested in the pill. The toad was stunned. The toad called Shen Shi his grandpa, asking if he was really getting the pill. Shen Shi smirked, asking what the toad thought he needed it for, and then demanded some help in return. The toad asked if Shen Shi expected him to become his pet for just that. Shen Shi asked if the toad didn't want to. The toad quickly backtracked, saying he'd do anything, just put the sword down first. Shen Shi told the toad to take the pill, promising protection since demonic beasts would be drawn to the transformation. The toad, though, was worried about all the beasts around. Shen Shi reassured the toad, saying nothing could hurt him with him around. A demonic beast roared and charged at Shen Shi. Suddenly, it was sliced in half. Shen Shi quipped that the peak golden core demonic beast had guts, charging straight at him. He noted that since the toad, a nascent soul, usually keeps beasts at bay, that peak golden core beast must be the strongest here. The toad explained that while the beast's cultivation couldn't match Shen Shi's, their sheer numbers were overwhelming. Shen Shi told the toad not to worry, he'd gather the surrounding spiritual energy and absorb it for them. He promised to help the toad gather even more spiritual energy on his side. Shen Shi released his breath into the aura in his hand, watching it scatter quickly. The aura spread out fast, filling the area. The toad marveled at the energy gathering, wondering if Shen Shi was still a golden core cultivator, or maybe the type with hundreds of golden pills in his stomach. Shen Shi finished up and, realizing he had no AoE skills, wondered how he should deal with all these beasts. He said he'd take care of things first. Shen Shi unleashed sword auras into the sky, leaving the demonic beasts in shock. The beasts were immediately surrounded by Shen Shi's aura. Shen Shi activated his overlapping mountain skill. He figured they might as well stay, then plus, delivering a villain line felt pretty satisfying. Even if it was just for the demonic beasts, Shen Shi unleashed his stepping wave skill. Shen Shi started slicing through the demonic beasts like he was chopping through air. Demonic beasts dropped like flies, blood spraying everywhere as they hit the ground. Shen Shi asked the toad how his technique was looking. The toad was confused, asking what Shen Shi meant by techniques since he only had the one. Shen Shi suggested they grab the inner pills and materials, because money. The toad realized Shen Shi was terrifying and decided not to annoy him again. Shen Shi joked about the snakeskin being so silky it'd be turned into stockings in modern times. He could already imagine people fighting over it. Then it hit him, if the material could be stockings, it could be weapons too. He was thinking of hooking up some disciples with magical weapons for the competition anyway. Shen Shi stopped his daydreaming mid-thought. He was talking about his disciple after all. Out of nowhere, the toad thanked Shen Shi for the protection, saying the worst was over. Shen Shi nodded, saying it was good. The toad was about to transform, so he figured it was time for a name. He asked if the toad was sure it was a guy. The toad corrected him, she was female. Shen Shi cursed, asking why the toad was attracted to his illusionary white jade frog. The toad was shocked. Xiao Bai, her first love, was just an illusion. Shen Shi promised he'd find the toad a real one later. She asked if it was real, and then agreed, telling him to name her. Shen Shi decided to name her Xiao Bai since her body reminded him of blank ink and jade. Xiao Bai asked where his manners were. Back at Muling Castle, Luo Shasha asked the clan elders if they saw her actions as making her the acting castle head. One elder replied it was from Muling Castle and the Jade Kingdom's royal family. Plus, the sixth prince was into Yuting, which worked in her favor. Another elder agreed, warning that if they broke their promise now, it could anger the royal family. They couldn't afford to offend the Jade Kingdom's 3 great cultivators. Another noticed Yuting had returned with them, meaning she really didn't have a sect. The sixth prince was waiting outside. If Luo Shasha agreed, Muling Castle's future would be secure. Luo Shasha had enough and asked the elders if they were okay with arranging a marriage without her, claiming it was good for the castle. She pointed out that while the 3 great halls had been losing money, the elders' pockets had been growing. She wasn't stupid and refused to agree to that marriage, no matter what. Just then, Wang Tang, the sixth prince, called it an inspiring statement. He added that he hadn't expected Luo Shasha's body to be hot and her temper to match. He liked it. Wang Tang questioned how anyone could force someone like her into something, saying Luo Shasha had been widowed before marriage, and her purity was a waste if she didn't find a husband. He said he didn't like beating around the bush and proposed that Luo Shasha and Yuting call each other sisters since they weren't related. He suggested they both marry him, promising Muling Castle would thrive with backing from the Jade Palace. Luo Shasha apologized for disappointing Wang Tang and firmly refused. She called on Bai Jishui to handle their exit, and he just nodded, doing it. The bodyguard dropped the bomb that Bai Jishui was at the mid-foundation stage. Wang Tang, confused, asked why the bodyguard had said Muling Castle had no cultivator, yet this was happening. The bodyguard cleared things up, saying Bai Jishui wasn't out of time and, in fact, had leveled up his sword chi. Wang Tang politely offered Bai Jishui triple the pay Muling Castle was giving him, all because he's the sixth prince. Bai Jishui politely turned down the offer, saying he had duties and asked them to leave. The bodyguard admitted he wasn't a match for Bai Jishui, and Wang Tang decided it was time to bounce. Xiao Bai, unimpressed, called Wang Tang a coward for just walking off. Shen Shi tried explaining to Xiao Bai that Wang Tang was the type of annoying ninja turtle that caused major trouble, and Muling Castle's mess was about to unfold. Xiao Bai, curious, asked why Shen Shi didn't step in if his disciple was from Muling Castle and all this chaos was happening. Shen Shi explained that after dealing with the prince, there'd be the royal family, immortal sects, and more. It was a never-ending cycle, and honestly, it wouldn't make for fun reading. Shen Shi pointed out that with Bai Jishui on Muling Castle's side and the Jade Kingdom's trio of cultivators, things were balanced. Some drama? Sure, but no wars. And with Luo Shasha being cautious, major fights were off the table. Xiao Bai, suddenly concerned, asked if the whole cultivator world was that risky. Shen Shi warned it was risky and that Xiao Bai should learn to hide and be low-key, or she'd end up like roasted chicken. Xiao Bai retorted that she's a toad, not some chicken. Shen Shi said he'd take Xiao Bai to meet his disciple. Meanwhile, Yuting was lounging on her bed. She was deep in meditation, an aura swirling around her. Yuting stayed focused, meditating. Hovering above her bed, the aura danced around her. Yuting snapped her eyes open. She blinked, shocked to see her master, Shen Shi. Shen Shi praised Yu Ting, impressed she had reached the first stage so quickly. Truly impressive. Yu Ting, too excited, lunged at Shen Shi, leaving him stunned. Without warning, Yu Ting plopped onto Shen Shi's lap, leaving him totally flabbergasted. Shen Shi, still processing, asked if she really had to be that excited after just a few days. Yu Ting complained that it had been 10 days since he left after dropping the cultivation method and not even letting her say goodbye properly. Shen Shi promised, as long as Yu Ting was good, she'd only have to ask, and he'd make sure she got what she wanted. Yu Ting asked if literally anything was okay. She daydreamed about Shen Shi calling her the best disciple ever and rewarding her big time. Yu Ting's nose suddenly erupted in blood, and Shen Shi freaked out, asking if she was okay. Yu Ting said she was fine, just got too excited after eating too well earlier. Shen Shi quickly changed the subject, mentioning he had something to show, hoping the nosebleed wasn't what he feared. He introduced Xiao Bai, warning Yu Ting not to be tricked by her cuteness since Xiao Bai was at nascent soul stage. He was leaving her in Yu Ting's care for safekeeping. Yu Ting asked if Shen Shi was leaving again, and if he didn't want her anymore. Shen Shi called her silly, asking how he could ever cast her aside. Then, out of nowhere, Luo Sha Sha dropped a cup, shattering it on the floor. Luo Sha Sha just stood there, speechless and stunned. She stared, double-checking if her eyes were playing tricks. Luo Sha Sha saw Yu Ting crying, and the blood staining her skirt. Shen Shi quickly asked Luo Sha Sha to let him explain. Luo Sha Sha stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Shen Shi anxious. Outside, Luo Sha Sha called Shen Shi a monster, shocked he was rushing things when Yu Ting was just a year from coming of age. She wondered if she looked old already. Shen Shi, surprised, reassured her she was still young and pretty, and couldn't possibly look old. Luo Sha Sha, convinced he was joking, apologized for interrupting earlier. Shen Shi quickly clarified it was a misunderstanding. He and Yu Ting were teacher and disciple, and the blood was just from a nosebleed. He had no clue why it happened. Luo Sha Sha shrugged, saying she hadn't said anything, so Shen Shi didn't need to explain. Shen Shi admitted he was worried Luo Sha Sha would misunderstand. Luo Sha Sha asked, genuinely confused, what there was to misunderstand. She asked why he cared if she misunderstood, and while Shen Shi fumbled, he thought maybe she was teasing him, then realized they were both adults, so what was the big deal? Shen Shi suddenly grabbed Luo Sha Sha by the waist. Shen Shi called her madam, worried she might misunderstand his intentions, but Luo Sha Sha insisted he just call her Sha Sha. Shen Shi asked if calling her madam wasn't more fun, and Luo Sha Sha grinned, knowing that's how Shen Shi liked to play. But that was just in his head. Shen Shi was still stammering and flustered in reality. Shen Shi quickly bolted, saying he left some things for Yu Ting and that Luo Sha Sha could use them too. He'd already briefed Yu Ting, so he had to go. Moments later, Shen Shi was already flying on his sword in the sky. Shen Shi wondered why he panicked at the worst moment, embarrassed, and promised to do things differently next time. Suddenly, the channeling jade sword chimed in. Shen Shi asked if it was a messaging app when Yu Shuang messaged him, calling him Qianren. She said she was back at the Tay, an immortal sex sub-clan, and safe, then casually asked if she could hit him up more often, and if he had any questions. Shen Shi wondered if this was an online dating setup, and if Yu Shuang was trying to start e-dating with his ex. Meanwhile, Yu Shuang laughed, saying Shen Shi had accepted, as expected. Yu Shuang, knowing exactly who she was talking to, called Shen Shi a jerk and asked if he thought he could hide from her. She scoffed, saying she'd searched for him that long, so let's see where he'd run off to now. Yu Shuang asked why Shen Shi had just disappeared without saying goodbye back then. The clouds lingered over Airbai Peak, everything calm. Shen Shi's disciples were gossiping away in the bamboo forest. They were chilling in the hot spring. Sang Yuling commented that Xianyu was pretty stacked and asked if she could touch them, but Xianyu shot back that there was no way and she should go to Han Xianpai, who was just as big. Han Xianpai asked Sang Yuling what her plan was. Sang Yuling suggested Han Xianpai just give in, and Han Xianpai screamed. Dong Yuli clicked her tongue, saying Sang Yuling had grown a lot too. Sang Yuling screamed, asking what Dong Yuli was up to. Dong Yuli said she'd heard Sang Yuling had also been touched by Shen Shi, asking if it felt the same. Sang Yuling denied it, begging Dong Yuli to forgive her. Moments later, Shen Shi showed up, asking when Airbai Peak had a bamboo forest and hot spring and what was going on here. Shao Qi'er announced Shen Shi's return and proudly claimed the hot spring was her doing. Shen Shi asked if that was true and said he'd soak after Dong Yuli, and the others were done to relax from his trip. Xiao Qier quickly declined. She said she set it up so Shen Shi could catch a glimpse of her senior sister's seductive bodies while they bathed. Then she asked if he didn't like her. Shen Shi was ready to say he liked her, but hesitated. He quickly snapped back to reality. Shen Shi told her to grow up, wondering where she learned those charm tricks, daring to use them on him. Xiao Qier whined, admitting her mistake and explaining she hadn't cultivated yet, so she resorted to learning self-defense with the trials coming up. Shen Shi told her not to use charm tricks on her master. He reassured her about her cultivation and said he'd help she should find him later in his room. Xiao Qier agreed. He declared he'd handle the next matter. A moment later, Shen Shi called for Bai Ran. Bai Ran greeted him politely and apologized for dropping by uninvited. Shen Shi reassured her, saying no worries and they should talk inside. They both entered Shen Shi's courtyard. Bai Ran thought about the rumors Shen Shi, chaotic, highly cultivated, arrogant, and tyrannical to his disciples. But right now, though he was cold, he didn't feel uncomfortable. He made people feel at ease. Bai Ran figured there must be plenty who liked him. She sighed, wondering why she was thinking that. Shen Shi asked for forgiveness, saying he didn't have much to offer her. Shen Shi mentioned Dong Yi's dried edelweiss herb stalks, which made a decent tea, and invited Bai Ran to sit. Bai Ran explained she came to thank Shen Shi for recommending Wei Qin at the Immortal Sapling Conference. Shen Shi shrugged it off, saying it was no big deal and that Bai Ran was a better fit to teach Wei Qin. Bai Ran explained her low rank in the sect and how her disciples lacked talent. She knew it was hard to find good talent and that Shen Shi, with his dual spirit root, gave Wei Qin to her out of care. She'd remember it. She said her Lingzhu peak wasn't much compared to Airbai peak, but fate gave her iceberg bamboo jade, a perfect match for his techniques, and it was her gift of thanks. She hoped he'd accept. Shen Shi asked how that could be, pointing out that it was so valuable, so Bai Ran must need it more. Bai Ran urged him to accept it, promising to always remember his kindness. Shen Shi realized Bai Ran, seemingly gentle and soft-spoken, was actually tough on the inside, so determined she wouldn't waver even in death. He agreed, saying if Bai Ran ever needed help, she could just hit him up. Bai Ran was genuinely touched by Shen Shi's offer. She asked if there was anything else she needed help with, saying no need to be shy about it. Bai Ran said she wanted to craft a magic treasure for Wei Qin, and since Shen Shi was a master at refinement, she was here to ask for his help with an immortal sword. She even brought materials for him. Shen Shi saw how much effort Bai Ran put in for Wei Qin and agreed, thinking he could also make some magic treasures for his disciples. Bai Ran thanked him, saying she'd do anything for him without a second thought. Shen Shi told her no need for formalities and urged her to drink up. They sipped tea together, enjoying the moment. Bai Ran blushed, drinking tea while stealing glances at Shen Shi. Shen Shi thought, sipping tea with Bai Ran, that this was surprisingly nice. Shen Shi suddenly froze, alarmed. He realized the spiritual link's suppression was slipping again, and he nearly lost his god stage. Bai Ran was about to compliment the tea but stopped short. She was shocked by what Shen Shi was doing. Bai Ran quickly copied him. Bai Ran thought Shen Shi was way too chill, dishing out wisdom like it was nothing. Meanwhile, she wondered if her vibe could spread, while he wondered if he could already take the substitute trainer gig. Shen Shi thought Tao rhythms and spiritual links came every month or so. Even anti-red was more frequent. Maybe he should give his disciples a boost by spreading it himself. A few moments later, Bai Ran opened her eyes. Bai Ran asked if she had made a breakthrough. Shen Shi congratulated her, saying she'd skipped the middle stage and made it to late Golden Core. From now on, she'd be Master Bai Ran. Bai Ran thanked him profusely. Shen Shi asked why she was thanking him, then admitted it was all her hard work. He couldn't admit that his suppression leaked Tao rhythms though. Bai Ran got flustered, calling out his name. She asked if she could come more often and said his tea was amazing. Shen Shi grinned, saying she was always welcome anytime. He watched as Bai Ran strutted off. Shen Shi called out for Xiao Qier to show up. Xiao Qier grumbled, asking why Shen Shi had to be so annoying and so charming at the same time. Shen Shi asked how her cultivation was going. Xiao Qier explained she'd tried everything, but the spiritual energy vanished after 5 cycles, leaving nothing. She felt bad for wasting the qi gathering elixir. Shen Shi called her a fool, wondering why she'd cry over a qi elixir. He said he found a way to boost her cultivation and told her to give it a shot. Shen Shi used the same method he'd just done with Bai Ran. Xiao Qier opened her eyes, surprised. She grabbed Shen Shi's arm in shock. Xiao Qier said she felt better, leaving Shen Shi stunned. Shen Shi mentioned he'd also prepared a mutated Edelweiss herb if her cultivation hit a wall. Xiao Qi'er spotted a strand of hair not matching Shen Shi's color and immediately asked, scrambling him with her question about which woman it belonged to. Xiao Qi'er reassured Shen Shi, saying it was normal for someone his age, but warned him not to fall for any bold women. If he chose one, she'd want to know first. Shen Shi raised an eyebrow at her comments and told her to hurry up and cultivate since the clan experience was dangerous. Xiao Qi'er agreed to take the Edelweiss herb. Shen Shi thought the so-called goddess was cheeky and two-faced, totally undisciplined and wild. He declared that Xiao Qi'er's problem was sorted, and the world's path was back on track. When the frostless Jade's Deluo gold arrived, it'd be time to make magic treasures for the disciples. 3 months later, the elders gathered at Dengtian Peak, the main peak of Shanding sect. One elder mentioned scouts from Diqing's sect were spotted near their spiritual veins. Another elder noted that Diqing's sect had been making moves, swallowing up nearby sections. He asked if they were planning to stir up trouble with them next. Ning Shiming said that Diqing's master, Huang Wushan, was on par with him, and there had been no breakthroughs. He didn't think they'd start a war, but they still needed to be ready. He called the Great Elder, asking him to make a trip to Dongming Pavilion in Yuhua sect and explain things, hoping to get their support when needed. The Great Elder said he was happy to go to Dongming Pavilion but dreaded going to Yuhua sect since his time was limited. He hoped Ning Xinming would understand. Ning Xinming remembered a messenger sent to Yuhua sect 10 years ago who returned looking worse for wear. Cultivation dropped, so he understood the elder's hesitation. Another elder chimed in, saying anyone heading to Yuhua sect needed to be strong to show sincerity. Bai Ran, at late golden core stage, was perfect for the job. Ning Xinming said Bai Ran was still fresh from her breakthrough, so sending her alone seemed iffy. The elder cheekily suggested Ning Xinming send Shen Shi along, saying a perfected golden core expert would get respect from Yuhua sect. Ning Xinming realized the elder was just looking for an excuse to stir the pot. He was about to comment on Shen Shi being secluded, but a blinding light from the mountains cut him off. Ning Xinming asked what the heck that was, thinking it was an immortal treasure. The elder pointed to Airbai Peak, but Ning Xinming breathed a sigh of relief. Barely an immortal treasure, just a fancy Xian one. Ning Xinming was left speechless. Shen Shi realized he almost messed up big time, nearly creating an immortal treasure. That would have been a headache. A moment later, Shen Shi's disciples came running over. Shen Shi asked how their cultivation was going. Dong Yuli said everyone was working hard, especially Xiao Qi'er and Han Xian Pai. Those two were already at level 5 in Qi refining. Shen Shi nodded, impressed. Level 5 already? Xiao Qi'er was basically an intermediate cultivator now. Dong Yuli called Xiao Qi'er over, saying Shen Shi's spiritual energy was unstable after just coming out, so she shouldn't get too close. Xiao Qi'er teased, saying Dong Yuli was overreacting. Her 5 elements were fixed, and she could handle the spiritual energy just fine. Dong Yuli and Xiao Qi'er shared a smile, but there was this weird tension that made Shen Shi a little nervous. Shen Shi casually mentioned that Dong Yuli wasn't too shabby herself, being at the 2nd level of foundation building. Dong Yuli explained it was his technique that helped her break through. Shen Shi asked if she'd mastered the softness around the finger yet. Dong Yuli nodded, saying she got the technique down, and even started tweaking it to suit her own spiritual power better. Shen Shi thought the technique he taught was just a small gesture, but Dong Yuli was going on like it was revolutionary. Still, he acknowledged her effort, and asked her to show him how it worked. Dong Yuli agreed to demonstrate but asked Xiao Qi'er to come along, since she was great at handling spiritual energy impacts. Xiao Qi'er agreed but jokingly asked Dong Yuli to go easy on her. Dong Yuli promised to, since it was just a demo. Meanwhile, Shen Shi thought to himself, this feels less like a cultivation novel and more like a court drama. Xiao Qi'er asked Dong Yuli to go easy on her again, and Dong Yuli, of course, agreed. Meanwhile, Shen Shi looked like he was having an epiphany. Then, out of nowhere, he shouted, "That's it!" Shen Shi announced that he had crafted an immortal sword for Xiao Qi'er, telling her to try it out and see if it fit. Xiao Qi'er double-checked if it was actually an immortal sword and thanked Shen Shi. A few moments later, Xiao Qi'er remarked that the immortal sword was kinda odd. Xiao Qi'er jokingly asked if it was some kind of wood chipper. Shen Shi chuckled, agreeing, and told her to trust her master's handiwork. Xiao Qi'er felt the Tao rhythm flowing through her from the sword, so yeah, it was definitely a high-tier weapon. She nodded, agreeing. Out of nowhere, Xing Yuling screamed, making everyone jump. Shen Shi asked Sang Yuling what was going on. Sang Yuling pointed out that Dong Yuli and Shao Qi'er were in a full-on fight. Shen Shi nodded, thanking Sang Yuling, while Xianyu said they should move, things were getting dangerous. Shen Shi thought it was time to see if the apprenticeship had paid off. Dong Yuli stomped the ground, unleashing a freezing aura. The aura turned sharp and shot straight at Shao Qi'er. Shao Qi'er swung her sword, slicing through Dong Yuli's attack. Dong Yuli summoned chains with her aura, wrapping them around Shao Qi'er in a flash. Xianyu noticed the solidified spiritual power, something only possible in the foundation building realm, and asked how Shao Qi'er pulled it off. Dong Yuli joked it might be the wood chipper effect. Shao Qi'er swung her sword again, sending a powerful slashing aura flying. Dong Yuli's chain shattered, and Shao Qi'er charged right in. Dong Yuli thought Shao Qi'er broke an ice prison even foundation building folks struggle with, but still, she was a bit green. Dong Yuli used her skill, Bind. Shen Shi reflected on the spell's power. It was an upper-grade spirit-level spell, and if she pushed it, it could become supreme grade. He couldn't help but admire the effort and talent behind it. Shen Shi wondered why Dong Yuli wasn't portrayed as this brilliant, hardworking genius in the original. She didn't even train much before, so what made her want to fight now? Meanwhile, Dong Yuli stared at Shen Shi, lost in her thoughts. She thought, the stronger she got, the closer she'd be to Shen Shi. Once she surpassed him, there'd be no way he could turn her down. Shao Qi'er suddenly pointed out that Dong Yuli seemed distracted. Shao Qi'er took the chance to swing her sword at Dong Yuli. Shen Shi guessed it was Shao Qi'er's signature move, Spirit Chopping Wheel, which was supposed to come after the Golden Core stage. He wondered how she figured it out in the 5th stage of Qi refining. He figured that with the 5 elements rotating, even with Dong Yuli's mutated spiritual root, the Spirit Chopping Wheel would totally disintegrate her spiritual power. Shao Qi'er told Dong Yuli to brace herself for the attack. Dong Yuli admitted that Shao Qi'er's power was way beyond her expectations, but she still wasn't done with her technique. Shao Qi'er was shocked when she froze mid-air out of nowhere. Dong Yuli snapped her fingers with a smug grin. Shao Qi'er reluctantly accepted her defeat. Shen Shi dried Shao Qi'er off, reminding her not to catch a cold. Shen Shi noted that Dong Yuli's ice control spell was supreme grade now, and suggested they call it the Ice Crushing Formation. Just as Shen Shi was about to talk about her new move, Shao Qi'er interrupted, saying it came from the 5 elements of reincarnation. She called it the Spirit Chopping Wheel due to its power to dissipate spiritual energy. Shen Shi told everyone to come to him. He had a weapon ready for each of them, and with only 2 months left before training, they should get familiar with their new gear. He added that he knew Xianyu hated pain, so he had a defense-focused treasure for her. Xianyu was grateful. Out of nowhere, Sang Yuling called out to Shen Shi. She asked Shen Shi if her stick was for bashing things. Shen Shi said no, it was a magic wand. She channeled spiritual power into it to cast spells. Sang Yuling wondered if a magic wand was just a fancy stick for messing with hair and still not a weapon. Shen Shi just shrugged and said sure, if that works for you. Out of nowhere, Dong Yuli called Shen Shi, asking about her and Han Xianpai's treasures. Shen Shi immediately told her it was something to wear. Dong Yuli cheekily asked if Shen Shi wanted her to put it on and show him. Shen Shi nodded, clearing his throat, and said naturally, get it on quick so you can get used to it. Han Xianpai asked Shen Shi what the black thing was. Shen Shi explained it was made from Misty Snake skin, a combo offense and defense magic gear silk high tights. Han Xianpai noted it was strong, but seriously, how was she supposed to wear it? Shen Shi muttered, just go through the hole, then slide it up your leg. Han Xianpai nodded, pretending she totally got it. Han Xianpai hastily slipped on the silk tights. She carefully pulled the tights up both legs like a pro. Shen Shi couldn't help but think, with legs like hers, these tights are a perfect fit. Genius, really? Xianyu was side-eyeing Shen Shi, looking way too concerned for her liking. Xianyu asked Dong Yuli if she was seriously going to wear it like that. Dong Yuli shrugged, saying of course, it's the magic gear Shen Shi made just for me. Dong Yuli called out to Shen Shi. She asked Shen Shi if she looked good in it. Shen Shi was mesmerized, muttering, yeah, you look great. Shao Qi'er cut in, saying Shen Shi's gear wasn't just for looks, asking if Dong Yuli needed her help to test its defense. Shen Shi quickly told Shao Qi'er to stop, suggesting they all go back and get familiar with their gear while he headed to the main peak. Moments later, Shen Shi zoomed off to the main peak on his flying sword. As Shen Shi walked into the hall, he wondered what the patriarch needed from him. Ning Xinming said the Di Qing sect had been making moves near the Shangding immortal sect's spiritual veins. After some talks, he added they had to inform their allied sects, just in case something went down. Shen Shi asked what exactly the issue was. Ning Xinming suggested Shen Shi represent them to unite with the nearby Shangding immortal sect and form a united front. Shen Shi asked if the three elders weren't more fit for the job. It hit him that the great tribulation of the Shangding immortal sect was wrapping up, giving him a perfect shot to kill the protagonist like in the original plot, where the Great Elder and the Second Elder met their ends. Ning Xinming explained the Great Elder was heading to Dongming Pavilion, while Bai Ran would deal with the Yuhua sect, though they were concerned. Shen Shi interrupted, asking if Bai Ran was really heading to the Yuhua sect. Ning Xinming confirmed, saying it was all part of their plan. With Bai Ran already in the late Golden Core stage but time running out, they hoped Shen Shi, who was already there, could accompany her. Shen Shi guessed the plot had shifted again. The butterfly effect got bigger, and now he wasn't sure if he could still control the story. Ning Xinming reminded him that the Shangding immortal sect was all for one, and Shen Shi was part of that. Shen Shi agreed, nodding that Ning Xinming had a point, so he'd do it. The elders were caught off guard by Shen Shi's answer, looking pretty surprised. One elder even turned to Shen Shi, utterly confused. Meanwhile, one disciple wondered if Shen Shi only agreed because of Bai Ran, and another insisted there was definitely something going on. She reminded her friend how Bai Ran broke through after visiting Shen Shi, so they were obviously double cultivating. One disciple confessed her jealousy, wishing she could double cultivate with Shen Shi too, and another teased her, claiming it was her turn first. Shen Shi, ready to go, declared he'd head off first. He called Bai Ran, telling her to meet him in his room later. Bai Ran admitted she wasn't ready yet, leaving the disciples shocked. Shen Shi reassured her, saying he was all set, and thought to himself, it's just magic gear for Wei Qing, what's there to prepare? Moments later, Shen Shi and Bai Ran strolled toward Airbai Peak. Xiao Qi'er greeted Shen Shi, announcing her return. Shen Shi praised Xiao Qi'er for being a good girl and told her to find her senior sister while he got to work. Xiao Qi'er asked if that was Bai Ran, then greeted her. Bai Ran greeted Xiao Qi'er, surprised she didn't think she was a female. Xiao Qi'er asked if Bai Ran came to Airbai Peak to hang out with Shen Shi. Bai Ran quickly replied, no, then awkwardly explained Shen Shi just wanted to spend time with her. Shen Shi mentioned he and Bai Ran would head to the Yuhua sect soon to discuss stuff, and Bai Ran casually added they were going to double cultivate. Bai Ran was taken aback, asking, is that all? Shen Shi asked what else there was, jokingly wondering if Bai Ran just meant double cultivating, which she quickly denied, saying it was nothing. Xiao Qi'er reminded Shen Shi she told him to find a wife, then playfully challenged him, asking if it wasn't too much to bring someone home without a heads up. Shen Shi threatened to spank Xiao Qi'er if she didn't stop, and she ran off laughing. Bai Ran noted the Di Qing sect's behavior was way too weird and suspected things weren't that simple. But in her head, she couldn't shake what Xiao Qi'er said about Shen Shi finding a wife. Bai Ran, feeling intimidated, asked what on earth Shen Shi was showing her. Shen Shi casually mentioned the sword Hanju, made with the bamboo jade Bai Ran gave him, saying it was a complex piece but totally perfect for Wei Qing. He added that the sword's special power was how it got stronger with more spiritual energy. Bai Ran checked the energy and figured it was a mid-tier, profound-grade treasure. Shen Shi joked that Wei Qing would be dangerous with the sword, but he put a seal on it so no one would notice its full power unless it's used to the max. Bai Ran protested, saying it was too precious for her to keep, while Shen Shi casually spoke of it, even though their patriarch's top treasure was just mid-tier. Shen Shi pointed out that Wei Qing was close to Xiao Qi'er and the sword could save her in tough times, so Bai Ran should look out for her. Bai Ran thanked Shen Shi. Shen Shi noticed that Bai Ran had earlier mentioned the Di Qing sect wasn't so straightforward. Bai Ran thought about how Shen Shi treated her so well, but he didn't seem to lack anything. His cultivation was high, and he had all the treasures. Still, it felt like he was looking up to her. Shen Shi said if the Di Qing sect was up to something, they wouldn't be so obvious about it, too easy to catch. Shen Shi suggested that when they go to the Yuhua sect, they couldn't go straight and one would go openly, and the other secretly, giving them a backup plan no matter what. He asked Bai Ran for her thoughts, catching her off guard. Bai Ran, confused, said she thought once was enough. Shen Shi pressed her, asking what she meant by once and why that was enough. Bai Ran assured him she got it and would prepare properly. Shen Shi was left speechless, totally puzzled by her actions. Bai Ran repeated she understood, but Shen Shi interrupted, challenging if she really did, before deciding to explain the plan again. Xiao Qi'er thought Bai Ran seemed pure, but reading between the lines, she was probably an expert, so she'd need to stay alert. Xiao Qi'er realized that Shen Shi would head to the Yuhua sect soon, and it made her uneasy. She knew her level was too low to be helpful, so Shen Shi probably wouldn't take her along. Xiao Qi'er wondered if Shen Shi couldn't resist the temptation of beauties and became someone else's dual cultivation partner, then there'd be no hope for her. Suddenly, Shen Shi exclaimed that Xiao Qi'er was getting bolder, sneaking around listening in. Xiao Qi'er tried to explain, but Shen Shi cut her off. Shen Shi told Xiao Qi'er to focus on her cultivation and get familiar with the treasure while he's away. Xiao Qi'er gave a quick thumbs up. Shen Shi realized he didn't really dive into the Shangding sect disaster in the book, so now he was just guessing based on the aftermath. In the original ending, when Xiao Qi'er came back, the sect was wrecked, the patriarch was messed up, and a bunch of elders were dead. Classic big sect on the brink of collapse vibes. He guessed that in this chaos, someone probably wanted to off Xiao Qi'er, who'd leveled up again. But it all started with them being messengers for the Yuhua sect, and now everything was different. The channeling jade sword suddenly buzzed. Shen Shi wondered if the sword was trying to deliver a message. Yu Wu Shuang message, asking if he died or just decided to ghost her. Shen Shi grumbled, ready to snap, thinking at least he still had his fam, wondering if Yu Wu Shuang had lost her mind. But he saw Yu Wu Shuang's messages flooding in, asking why he hadn't replied after all that. Shen Shi flopped onto his bed and started typing a response. He apologized and said he had been off the grid crafting weapons for 3 months. Yu Wu Shuang flooded him with messages, admitting she'd misunderstood and promising not to make him mad. She even said he didn't need to reply every time, just an okay was fine as long as he stayed in touch. Shen Shi thought about how Yu Wu Shuang was basically glued to her phone, and wondered why she had to be such a people pleaser. Meanwhile, Yu Wu Shuang thought Shen Shi wouldn't get mad because he was a scumbag, but then started second-guessing if maybe she was being too mean. She kept wondering if she was right about Shen Shi not actually being mad. Yu Wu Shuang's servant asked why she didn't just confess to Shen Shi. She snapped back, asking what they knew, explaining the huge misunderstanding and how she still wasn't sure how to face him. Meanwhile, Shen Shi was silently cursing, realizing every time he thought about Yu Wu Shuang fawning over his Qianren persona, it just pissed him off more. Yu Wu Shuang asked if Shen Shi was in a bad mood and if something was wrong because he hadn't replied. Shen Shi texted back, saying everything was fine, but he'd be off for a while, heading out with other immortals to search a hidden realm. Yu Wu Shuang asked what a hidden realm was and if it was dangerous. Shen Shi assumed he'd already mentioned immortals were with him, so he wasn't angry, and Yu Wu Shuang just needed to deal with it. He assured her not to worry, saying it wasn't dangerous. Yu Wu Shuang replied, telling Shen Shi to be careful and to let her know if there were any issues. She called for her servant, Little Luo. She ordered Little Luo to find all the hidden realm locations near Shangding sect because she was ready to see who was trying to steal her man. Little Luo asked if Shen Shi hadn't already broken up with her. Yu Wu Shuang shot back, saying it was just a phase, and Little Luo nodded along. The next morning, Shen Shi hit up Bai Ran. Shen Shi praised Bai Ran, saying her outfit was totally on brand for Bai Immortal. Bai Ran asked if he was mesmerized. Shen Shi smirked, agreeing, saying it was obvious, and suggested they head out better early than late. Shen Shi and Bai Ran flew through the Great Cloudy Mountains in Qingzhou region. Shen Shi warned that the core of the Great Cloudy Mountains was a total danger zone, with Taoyuan sect watching over it, while sects clashed constantly at the borders. He pointed out that sects like Yuhua, Dongming Pavilion, and Shangding often teamed up when things got tough, all for survival. Bai Ran and Shen Shi zipped through the skies like it was nothing. Shen Shi revealed Di Qing sect was a rising powerhouse with a refining tech that churned out spirit-grade treasures, making them nearly unstoppable. Bai Ran raised an eyebrow, asking if mass-producing spirit treasures was really that impressive, and if it'd bring bigger sects knocking. Shen Shi confirmed, naturally, it would attract attention insider info. He teased Bai Ran, asking if she thought everyone knew. Bai Ran then wondered if his face was a treasure too. Bai Ran asked how Shen Shi knew all this. Shen Shi brushed it off, telling Bai Ran not to ask. Bai Ran quickly apologized. Shen Shi explained that mass-producing spirit treasures drained resources big sects couldn't handle it, and small ones had no power. Di Qing's rapid growth was fueled by war. He warned that Diqing's sect had to tread lightly, or they'd face major roadblocks, especially with their path to Yuhua sect. Bai Ran realized Shen Shi was hiding a lot, fooling everyone. She thought, maybe all that temper and unpredictability was just an act. Bai Ran figured out the real Shen Shi was quiet and sharp, too sharp, in fact. She figured that made them pretty much untouchable. Shen Shi told Bai Ran to leave it to him. Her only job was to stir things up and head straight for Yuhua sect. Bai Ran took off, speeding ahead just as Shen Shi told her. Not long after, Bai Ran was surrounded by 3 cultivators, all on her tail. Bai Ran figured it out: an ambush. 3 cultivators, all at the mid-gold stage. She figured her jade bamboo skills would keep them from catching up by draining their energy. Meanwhile, Shen Shi saw that Bai Ran was still a bit green. Shen Shi caught on they weren't trying to catch her, they were draining her energy, and the real threat was ahead. Time to fight back. Out of nowhere, another cultivator jumped in, and they kept on chasing Bai Ran. Bai Ran felt the pressure of a late gold stage cultivator, and was like, uh-oh. Then, a flying sword came at her, and panic set in. She jumped off her jade bamboo, using it as a shield against the flying sword. She channeled her aura into the tassel on her clothes. With it, she made a quick net to catch her fall. Her jade bamboo wasn't slacking either, still fending off the flying sword. Out of nowhere, the flying sword deflected the jade bamboo sword. Bai Ran groaned internally. Peak gold stage. Great. The sword shot toward her at insane speed, and her alarm bells rang. She realized she couldn't win, but hey, might as well go down swinging. She hurled her weapon at the peak gold stage cultivator, ready to throw down. The middle gold stage cultivators yelled, saying Bai Ran didn't stand a chance. Bai Ran unleashed the hidden jade bamboo technique, night movement. She used it to deflect the middle gold stage cultivator's attack with ease. She followed up with fine leaves, quick and sharp. Then, a sharp pain hit, and she groaned. Her bamboo hairpin had been blocked, and the peak gold stage sword wielder hadn't even flinched. Meanwhile, her spiritual energy was running low. The peak gold stage cultivator sent his flying sword straight for her. Bai Ran realized she only had 1 night movement left, but it would drop her to middle gold stage and hurt her foundations, but she had no choice. Then, like magic, Shen Shi appeared out of nowhere. He stood between her and the peak gold stage cultivator, ready to take the hit. Shen Shi swung his sword like a pro, deflecting the peak gold stage's attack. The sword spun mid-air as it was sent flying. The peak gold stage cultivator quickly grabbed his sword back. He was shocked that a sword could break through the spiritual energy of his own. Shen Shi noticed that the peak gold stage cultivator was packing dual swords. Shen Shi warned he might not win, so Bai Ran needed to head to Yuhua clan for backup. Bai Ran zoomed off towards the Yuhua clan's gate. She landed without a scratch. Bai Ran introduced herself, asked the Yuhua clan for help, and explained how Shen Shi was covering her from Diqing's sect cultivators. Out of nowhere, Luo Qingqing grabbed Bai Ran's arm. Luo Qingqing locked eyes with Bai Ran, who looked at the tight grip on her arm. Luo Qingqing said the others should get Bai Ran settled, and they all nodded in agreement. Confused, Bai Ran let herself be escorted by the others. Another cultivator asked if they should help Shen Shi, but Luo Qingqing said they needed the sect master's say first. Moments later, Luo Qingqing updated sect master Gu Ning, who nodded. Gu Ning said they could stand down now. Luo Qingqing couldn't help but wonder if the rumors were true that the sect master had ties with Diqing's sect. She secretly hoped Shen Shi had managed to escape. Luo Qingqing froze as Elder Ke, the peak gold stage sword wielder, passed by. She instantly recognized him as one of Dai King's guys. Gu Ning greeted Elder Ke and apologized for not meeting him sooner. Elder Ke casually mentioned killing Shen Shi and asked about the one who got away. Gu Ning casually replied they had the escapee locked up in the dungeon. Elder Ke said they should bring her out. He was super interested in Bai Ran's unique technique. Gu Ning thought to herself, this guy's obsessed with cultivation. Can't even appreciate the beauty in front of him, only cares about her technique. She called Elder Ke strong, almost at nascent stage, but that technique probably wouldn't push him over the edge. The sect elder promised to help Elder Ke, just follow her for a week and he'd hit nascent stage. Elder Ke said he didn't need help, warned they should bring Bai Ran out before Diqing's sect starts causing problems. The sect elder was fuming at Elder Ke's words. She ordered her disciples to bring Bai Ran, and one of them jumped at the chance. A tired Bai Ran was dragged into the hall moments later. Bai Ran wasted no time asking Elder Ke about Shen Shi. Elder Kerr casually said he killed Shen Shi, but if Bai Ran shared her technique, he'd spare her. Bai Ran shot back, saying he could dream on she'd die before revealing anything. Elder Kerr noted it wasn't really her call. He told them they were going ahead with the plan and asked Gu Ning if she understood. Gu Ning nodded for her disciples to follow, and they all agreed. Meanwhile, Luo Qingqing was wondering where Elder Kerr was dragging Bai Ran off to. She also wondered if Shen Shi was really gone. Luo Qingqing decided she had to find a way to save Bai Ran. Moments later, Elder Kerr urged Bai Ran to give up the technique or face his wrath, but she told him to keep dreaming. Elder Kerr admitted Bai Ran was tough but warned the immortal realm would soon belong to Di Qing. Shan Ding, Yu Hua, and Dong Ming were next, and he wasn't giving them a place. Bai Ran snapped back, calling Elder Kerr a monster, claiming Di Qing would fall for all its evil deeds. Elder Kerr chuckled, saying Bai Ran was as pure as rumored, even elegant when cursing someone he was starting to get intrigued. Meanwhile, a hidden Yu Hua sect disciple realized she had no idea about Di Qing's plans and needed to warn the sect master. She hurried off to report to Gu Ning. Elder Kerr smirked, saying it looked like someone went to spill the beans. He dropped his disguise, revealing he was actually Shen Shi all along. Suddenly, Luo Qingqing showed up, telling the perv to back off, while Shen Shi claimed Bai Ran was too drained and he'd heal her wounds. Shen Shi casually blocked Luo Qingqing's sword attack with just his fingers. He was caught off guard when he recognized Luo Qingqing. Luo Qingqing freaked out when she realized it was Shen Shi. Shen Shi figured the Yu Hua sect sent more than one spy, and since he missed it, Luo Qingqing couldn't leave. Out of nowhere, Bai Ran hugged Shen Shi from behind. Bai Ran kept saying Shen Shi wasn't dead, and that was amazing. Luo Qingqing was equally relieved Shen Shi wasn't dead. Shen Shi apologized, saying even though it seemed like she planned to save Bai Ran and wasn't with Di Qing, she still couldn't leave. Luo Qingqing asked Shen Shi what the heck was going on. Shen Shi said he intentionally spoke up so Gu Ning would hear and wipe out all the Di Qing sect spies, then team up with Shang Ding sect again. He said Gu Ning's quick decisions would wrap it up in 2 hours, so for now, Luo Qingqing had to stick around with him. Luo Qingqing laughed, saying Shen Shi must be joking. She wasn't bothered one bit. Bai Ran was flustered, just sitting there, saying nothing. Luo Qingqing had the same quiet, flustered look. Meanwhile, Shen Shi looked seriously uncomfortable. He thought this was so awkward. 2 hours was way too long. Though the women around him were stunning, they barely knew each other. Gu Ning better hurry up. Suddenly, Bai Ran bumped into him with her shoulder. Shen Shi whipped around, but Bai Ran quickly looked away, blushing. She was too embarrassed to even say anything. Shen Shi started to call her name, but got cut off. At that moment, Luo Qingqing touched his hand. He turned to her, surprised to find Luo Qingqing staring at him with innocent eyes. Shen Shi quickly declared it was probably time, so they should head to Gu Ning. Meanwhile, a bunch of cultivators were lying in their own blood. After Gu Ning took care of all of them, Gu Ning said she'd deal with Elder Kerr herself. Shen Shi casually mentioned that Gu Ning didn't need to look for Elder Kerr. He already offed him and his ashes are probably just fertilizer now. Gu Ning immediately asked if he was really Shen Shi. Shen Shi nodded, impressed, saying she guessed his identity fast. Guessed she was pretty sharp. Gu Ning thought he was clever, and ironically, she realized she totally fell for his trick. She noted he still had the guts to show up and asked if he wasn't worried she'd backstab him. Shen Shi pointed out that her Di Qing sect elites would probably not forgive her if she lost this many of them. Gu Ning said though, facing the Dai Qing ancestor's wrath was probably scarier than the Shang Ding immortal ancestor. Luo Qingqing got nervous, sensing Gu Ning's murderous vibe, and wondered if they should team up to handle her. Shen Shi just laughed it off. He flexed his power and asked if Gu Ning was still right. Gu Ning was caught off guard by the sheer power Shen Shi was packing. She quickly realized it was divine transformation. Gu Ning thought, what was going on? Why would the Tao Lord's incarnation hang around a place like Shangding? And honestly, Shen Shi was one of the best in the immortal realm. Shen Shi telepathically asked if she got it, then made her promise to keep it on the down low. Gu Ning, all polite, called him her fellow Taoist and said she didn't know what he wanted, but she'd do whatever and keep quiet. Luo Qingqing and Bai Ran were confused, wondering why Gu Ning was acting all scared and suddenly ready to obey Shen Shi. Shen Shi figured Gu Ning was totally freaked out, but was that really the best look? Kinda screamed something was up. He laughed, calling Gu Ning's bluff, and said how could he possibly boss her around when the Yuhua sect's fate was in her hands? Gu Ning cleared her throat and said her sect was always tight with Shang Ding, and she promised the sect master to figure out the Di Qing sect's plans. Shen Shi nodded in approval. He said he got it. Gu Ning was super thoughtful, and he wanted to help her put on a good show. Gu Ning laughed, saying Shen Shi was just buttering her up, but yeah, he was resourceful, bold, careful, and pretty good looking too. Meanwhile, Luo Qingqing and Bai Ran were trying to figure out when Gu Ning cooked up those plans, and Bai Ran was just like, what the heck happened? Shen Shi said since Gu Ning had it all figured out, his job here was done. Gu Ning agreed, then backtracked, telling Shen Shi to take his sweet time. A moment later, Shen Shi casually mentioned they were leaving and Luo Qingqing didn't need to bother with the send-off. Luo Qingqing said she talked forever after Shen Shi met with Immortal Miao, and finally got to meet a Taoist master. She asked if it was true he wouldn't stay another day. Shen Shi said something like a leaf returns to the sea, and reassured her they'd meet again if it was meant to be. No need to worry. Luo Qingqing stood by the gates as Shen Shi and Bai Ran took off. She got all moody, thinking about what Shen Shi had said to her. Meanwhile, Shen Shi and Bai Ran were soaring into the sky together. Bai Ran asked if Shen Shi wrote that poem. He just shrugged. Nah. She asked when Shen Shi had teamed up with Gu Ning to pull off this whole act. Shen Shi sighed, and Bai Ran couldn't help but ask why. He shrugged and said it was nothing, just that there aren't many fairies as simple and lovely as Bai Ran. Bai Ran raised an eyebrow, saying she wasn't simple at all, just thought everything was way too coincidental. Shen Shi asked if all that was left was cuteness when there's no simplicity, and Bai Ran just stared, asking what he was even talking about. Shen Shi muttered to himself, feeling like a broken record, blaming his outrageous disciples for being impossible to handle. At Shangding, one of the disciples announced Shen Shi and Bai Ran were back. Shen Shi asked, "What's going on?" The disciple said something big went down. The Grand Elder's jade tablet shattered, and he's been declared dead. Bai Ran thought if it weren't for Shen Shi, she might not have made it back. With the Great Elder dead, the sect's strength took a hit, leaving only Shen Shi and the sect master as top-tier experts. Ning Xinming was glad they returned safe and asked what kind of dangers they faced on the road. Bai Ran explained they got ambushed by Di Qing sect cultivators, but luckily Shen Shi protected her, so she made it back in one piece. Ning Xinming cursed the Di Qing sect, but said he couldn't go up against them, not with Dongming Pavilion and Yuhua sect involved too. Shen Shi said the Yuhua sect's master had their back and would fully support Shangding sect. Ning Xinming asked if that was what Gu Ning said, mentioning he got a report saying Yuhua sect had colluded with Di Qing sect, and it was too late to chase them. Shen Shi mentioned that Gu Ning had personally wiped out Di Qing sect elites, leaving everything for them to handle now. Ning Xinming knew Shen Shi must have worked some magic to lock in Yuhua as their ally and suggested they pick out some treasures or elixirs as a reward. Bai Ran said Shen Shi did most of the work, so Ning Xinming should just give the reward to him. Shen Shi shrugged, saying he didn't need anything but maybe access to the Shangding sect's library for some new spells. He was feeling a little basic lately. Ning Xinming rolled his eyes, asking if that tiny room with 100 books could be considered a library. All the books were just basic spells for newbies so Shen Shi could have access anytime, but was that really a reward? Shen Shi remembered something, asking if Ning Xinming's personal disciple, Yan Yan, was back yet. Ning Xinming nodded, saying Yan Yan was back and lucky for her, she found a relic, got some chances, and condensed her energy. Shen Shi realized the plot was moving faster than expected. The next sect master was already back. He remembered Ning Yan Yan, who went from newbie to foundation building in 3 years, then completed what took others a century in just 6. After that, she left to chase the gold stage. Shen Shi figured Ning Yan Yan would be the next sect master when Ning Xinming bites the dust during the Great Calamity. Then, the main character would get a major power-up, a nascent stage white bone puppet hidden in a demon relic to save his butt over and over. He sighed, remembering Xiao Qie was still a kid in the Qi refining realm. Time to speed up her growth and get her in on that juicy opportunity. Shen Shi said they made an alliance with the Yuhua sect while the Di Qing sect teamed up with the Dongming Pavilion, so a big war was on the horizon. Time to prep the disciples with some military drills to get them ready. Ning Xinming added that it was basically 2 versus 2, so the disciples' fighting skills were key. He asked Shen Shi for his thoughts. Shen Shi said the Dead Vine Swamp was crawling with snakefish demons, but they were weak, just foundation building level. A small group of disciples should handle them, while the Golden Stage demons were perfect for the elders. Ning Xinming reminded them the clan trials were in 7 days. He'd sent some golden stage elders to check out the dead vine swamp. He told Shen Shi and Bai Ran to go rest since they'd already been through enough. The next day, at Airbai Peak, Shen Shi gathered his disciples. Shen Shi said the clan trials were in 7 days, so they needed to level up. He'd teach them every morning, hoping they'd make the most of it. Dong Yuli, Xiao Anu, and Han Xian Pai nodded, ready to level up. Xiao Qier said she got it, while Tseng Yuling just stared blankly. Shen Shi thought, I have no idea what I'm teaching, but hey, it sounds fancy enough in the novel. For him, it was just filler. He cleared his throat, wondering what profound wisdom he just shared. The 5 disciples were taken aback. They yelled out, claiming their weird knowledge had somehow grown. Shen Shi realized they'd already hit sage mode and he hadn't even begun. Tseng Yuling said she got it, but Shen Shi quickly corrected her no, she didn't. He figured since they were all rushing to absorb spiritual power, he might as well help them gather some energy from the heavens and earth. Shen Shi gathered his spiritual energy, and it was so massive, it could be seen swirling above the mountain. He was a bit puzzled by the outcome. Shen Shi wondered if the Tao rhythm he caught would make the spirit-gathering formation work better. He figured he'd test it out on a low-level fireball spell using gold stage power. Let's see if that weak spell could still pack a punch. He conjured a fireball in his palm. Shen Shi figured it was a weakling, but honestly, fire and him don't mix. He decided to throw in some Tao rhythm and see what happens. Shen Shi watched in shock as the fireball ballooned. He thought might as well add more. Shen Shi freaked out as the fireball expanded uncontrollably. He realized it was overkill, and if he let that fireball loose, Airbai Peak would be toast. He figured he couldn't absorb the fire since he didn't have the fire attribute, so now he had to find somewhere to launch it or risk holding it forever. The issue was launching it on Shan Ding Sect land. Wherever he threw it, it would cause chaos. Shen Shi figured he'd use mountains to contain the fireball. But nope, mountains weren't enough, so he'd toss in some Tao depth for good measure. The fireball was sealed and shrunk in his hand. Shen Shi realized Tao rhythm was like oil and spells like fire. The more oil, the bigger the fire. Using it to boost spells? Definitely a bad idea. He thought maybe with enough Tao energy, even a Taoist god couldn't stop him, since the highest realm was only transformation god. Guess he could chill in the golden stage for now. Shen Shi decided to check in on his disciples' progress. Xianyu was caught off guard. A surge of power filled her, and she stood there, stunned. Xianyu asked if she'd broken through to the 7th stage finally, after being stuck at the 6th for 2 years. Shen Shi praised her, saying she'd mastered it with ease, so her cultivation path would only get smoother from here. Xianyu thanked him immediately. Shen Shi waved it off, telling Xianyu not to kneel since he didn't want to see her back anyway. He got flustered when his eyes wandered back to Xianyu. He couldn't help but admire her figure, wondering how it looked from behind. Meanwhile, Xiao Qier was pissed, watching Shen Shi's reaction to Xianyu. Xiao Qier snapped, saying she was on the verge of breaking through to the 7th stage too, finally after being stuck at 6 for 2 years. Shen Shi said it wasn't bad, and after leveling up, she just absorbed spiritual energy to cultivate. He mentioned a treasure he had, telling Xiao Qier to use it to cultivate by channeling the fire spirit energy from the ball. Xiao Qier thanked him, calling him the best. Dong Yuli thought about how Shen Shi was still all about Xiao Qier. Shen Shi realized he might be playing favorites, and wondered what to give the others. Tseng Yuling suddenly piped up, saying she wanted one too. Shen Shi was shocked when Tseng Yuling jumped right into his face. Tseng Yuling was surprised by her own leap. Shen Shi said Tseng Yuling needed more work on controlling her spiritual energy. Dong Yuli pointed out that Shen Shi was bleeding. She said if Shen Shi needed it, she could handle it too. Shen Shi coughed up blood, thinking maybe they were all just human. He froze when he heard Bai Ran's shocked voice. Bai Ran mentioned she'd heard Shen Shi was teaching his disciples and thought about bringing Wei Qin to listen in. She suggested it wasn't the right time and would go ahead, but Shen Shi quickly clarified it was a misunderstanding and asked her to let Wei Qin stay. Meanwhile, by the board, a cultivator shared that the clan trials were almost here with awesome prizes. First place gets a high-quality spirit-grade treasure, top 3 get low-quality treasures, and top 5 score a spirit-condensing elixir. The top 10 get 100 spirit stones, and even low-ranking disciples can trade herbs and elixirs for spirit stones. Big opportunity for everyone. But then, another disciple asked about the rule that if someone finds the Centennial Snake Fish King, they get a one-on-one lesson with Shen Shi. Ning Yan Yan quietly listened in on the conversation. A moment later, Ning Xinming asked Ning Yan if she wanted to rank down, become a disciple, and enter the trials. Ning Yan confirmed and asked if it was obvious she was a disciple. Of course, she wanted to join the trials. Ning Xinming pointed out that Ning Yan was already in Golden Core stage, no longer a Foundation disciple. Ning Yan said it was really important to her, so Ning Xinming shouldn't dig too much. Ning Xinming sighed and agreed, saying he'd have Xing Xingtang add her name. Ning Yan called out to Ning Xinming, and he asked what was up. She hesitated, thinking for a second. Ning Yan brushed it off, saying it was nothing and she was leaving. She stepped out of the hall and let out a sigh. Ning Yan thought about how she couldn't say it yet. Shangding's sect was Ning Xinming's life's work. She'd wait for another chance but had to finish her master's task first. She figured the other disciples would be annoyed if she went for first place, plus it'd waste Ning Xinming's hard work. She needed to make sure they knew she wasn't after first. 7 days later, the elder announced the trials would last half a month and that all disciples should get their spirit plates. The plates had an emergency call feature that would notify the elder if broken. One disciple said to look ahead, while another pointed out how beautiful she was and asked who that immortal was. Another disciple chimed in, saying it was Ning Yan, a total natural beauty and the Patriarch's personal disciple. The disciples were shocked to hear she was the Patriarch's personal disciple. One said she was the legendary genius who hit Foundation building in 3 years, and another wondered if she'd already hit Golden Core. Shen Shi thought Ning Yan was one of the main characters Xiao Qi'er crushed on, a genius senior sister with killer battle skills. She was mid-Golden Core when she first appeared, but now seemed like early stage. He figured one reason the main character progressed so fast was that Ning Yan took Xiao Qi to the Demon Bone Ruins. After he saved her a few times, she fell for him and always helped out thanks to her talent. Shen Shi thought the problem was Ning Yan showing up too soon. Xiao Qi was already Xiao Qi'er, but hey, lilies could love too, so no big deal. The other disciples were shocked she was joining the trials. They asked if she was already Golden Core, why bother, and claimed they had no shot at first now. Suddenly, a disciple asked why Ning Yan was eyeing air by peak. Ning Yan greeted Shen Shi properly. Shen Shi told her no need for formalities since they were both Golden Cores. He figured he should leave a good impression on this main character, best to stay on her good side. Xiao Qi'er commented that Ning Yan's satin red dress was fire, and she was competitive. She asked what else the Celestial Pride was up to, but Dong Yuli stepped in, saying that the matters of their peak weren't for others to mess with. Shen Shi wondered what Xiao Qi'er and Dong Yuli's problem with Ning Yan was. He figured Xiao Qi'er should get along with her, or they'd never make it to the Demon Bones ruins. Shen Shi and Ning Yan stood facing each other. A disciple pointed out to the others to look. It was Ning Yan and Shen Shi. Shen Shi took a closer look and realized Ning Yan was, in fact, a heavenly beauty. Ning Yan thought to herself, Shen Shi was exactly as they said, handsome, like a fallen immortal, and unlike anyone else. Xiao Qi'er cleared her throat, then said Shen Shi would take them to get their spirit plates. She asked Ning Yan what she was doing here and demanded honesty. Shen Shi told Xiao Qi'er not to be rude and to learn from Ning Yan, maybe even bond with her. Xiao Qi'er couldn't believe Shen Shi called her rude over that celestial pride, and she just scoffed. She thought, what celestial pride, and figured Ning Yan couldn't keep it together after seeing Shen Shi probably still swooning over him. Ning Yan suddenly pieced everything together. Realizing she was here for the lesson with Shen Shi, she decided to ask him again but couldn't shake the heartbreak from earlier. The crowd was in complete shock, caught off guard by what unfolded. A disciple panicked, questioning how much was too much, while another wondered if Ning Yan remained innocent. Someone else defended them, reminding the group that looks weren't everything, and both Shen Shi and Ning Yan were stunning. She pondered how it escalated like this, as all she wanted was for everyone to compete and finish her master's task. Shen Shi realized that despite his talent and looks, he and Ning Yan were still strangers, and she was the MC's love interest. The one who tries to steal the girl never wins, so he couldn't understand why she had put him at risk after everything he'd done. She decided to pause, realizing she might not have been clear about her intentions. She made it clear that all she wanted was to learn from Shen Shi, not to win, not to care about the trial. None of that mattered to her. A disciple couldn't help but notice how much more straightforward Ning Yan had become. Xiao Qi'er cut in, reminding Ning Yan that confidence was fine, but she hadn't even received Shen Shi's teachings yet. Amused, Ning Yan wondered if Xiao Qi'er was trying to take her spot. Xiao Qi'er dismissed the idea, confident she could find it faster than Ning Yen Yen without all the noise and drama. But something didn't sit right with her. Why was Xiao Qi'er speaking so harshly to her own supporter? She questioned if Xiao Qi'er was accusing her of making a scene, while Xiao Qi'er wondered if someone as proud as Ning Yen Yen really couldn't see the truth. Ning Yen Yen suggested a bet to see who would find the centennial snakefish first. Xiao Qi'er saw the challenge and decided that since Ning Yen Yen proposed it, she should choose the stakes. She pointed out that if Ning Yen Yen lost, she'd have to call her master, leaving her to decide if she wanted to go through with it. Shen Shi was clearly uneasy, the situation weighing heavily on him. The other disciples shared the same uneasy feeling, none of them comfortable with how things were unfolding. Ning Yen Yen agreed, signaling she was in for the bet. She gave Shen Shi a polite farewell, but he quickly stopped her, signaling she needed to wait. Xiao Qi'er relayed her concerns to Shen Shi, mentioning his disciples' inability to let things go and making a bet. She asked him not to get angry, and he responded, assuring her that Ning Yen Yen was, in fact, a good person. Xiao Qi'er teased Shen Shi for being a fool, having taken Ning Yen Yan's side even though she'd been the one getting bullied, which meant he'd be ignored now. Shen Shi clarified that he wasn't playing favorites, just didn't want Xiao Qi'er to misjudge Ning Yen Yen. Dong Yuli couldn't understand why Shen Shi defended Ning Yen Yen, saying she only seemed pretty on the surface. Han Xian Pai, Xian Yu, and Seng Yuling stood frozen, lost for words. Shen Shi directed Xian Yu to grab her spirit plates and take Seng Yuling and Han Xian Pai along. The northern Qingzhou was a cold, swamp-filled region, with the withered vine swamp being one of the larger, more dangerous ones, mainly avoided due to the snake fish. Cultivators at the refinement stage used spiritual energy to keep from sinking into the swamp. Land conditions were easily adaptable too. The swamp, though solid on top, hid water beneath, causing even cultivators to sink if not careful. The mud shifted as snakefish began emerging unexpectedly. Beneath those swamps lay snakefish nest fierce, though not powerful, and deadly for anyone who slipped up. Xiao Qi'er reminded Dong Yuli that winning was non-negotiable, no outsiders messing with air by peak, but also made sure they stayed safe in the dangerous swamp, sticking together. Xiao Qi'er gave Dong Yuli a heads up about the snakefish ahead. Dong Yuli stepped forward, freezing the water with ease. The snakefish struggled as they became trapped in the ice. With swift elegance, Xiao Qi'er sliced the trapped snakefish into pieces. She landed smoothly, having finished cutting them all down. With no inner dan and low chances of finding one, they would need to venture deeper. Xian Yu noted the foundation stage snakefish were too risky, and Han Xian Pai emphasized their strength lay in sticking together. Seng Yuling's stomach growled, and Xiao Qi'er couldn't believe she was already hungry, just starting out. Dong Yuli mentioned they were ahead of the other teams, and took the chance to freeze the water for a break. The trial was long, after all. A man in the sky observed that the Changding team had entered the swamp. He suggested they strike while the Changding team was unaware. Seng Yuling complained about her hunger again. The smell in the air caught her attention. Seng Yuling noticed a glowing plant ahead. She pointed out the spirit grass up ahead. Xiao Qi'er reminded Seng Yuling not to touch the spirit grass, as it was worth points. The moment Xiao Qi'er grabbed the spirit grass, Seng Yuling caught a whiff of another one nearby. Xiao Qi'er asked where Seng Yuling had vanished to, while Xian Yu warned her not to wander off. Seng Yuling confirmed there was indeed another spirit grass around. Xiao Qi'er couldn't help but admit it was pretty lucky. Out of nowhere, Seng Yuling sniffed the air and detected another one. Seng Yuling mentioned she could still smell something ahead, making Xiao Qi'er wonder if there was more to find. Meanwhile, Shen Shi was deep in the zone, planting the spirit grasses. He couldn't resist bragging a bit, thinking he was a genius for coming up with that method. He said all they had to do was follow the trail of spirit grass, and they'd stumble upon the centennial snakefish he set up for them. He nodded, deciding it was time to check where they were now. Seng Yuling proudly raised the spirit grasses, while the others exchanged nervous glances. Xiao Qi'er immediately sensed something was off. Those spirit grasses were just too easy to find. Dong Yuli pointed out that they'd only gone one way and it felt like a trap, suggesting they try a different path. Shen Shi crouched behind the bushes, at a loss for words. He wondered why they were being so paranoid. Why not let him take charge? How would they find the nascent cave without the centennial snakefish? Out of nowhere, Shen Shi caught a whiff of something in the air. He quickly realized it was the scent of battle. Meanwhile, Ning Yen Yen darted across the ground with speed. She was ambushed by enemies who called forth a massive dragon. The sight of the summoned dragon sent a wave of alarm through her. With quick reflexes, she sidestepped and avoided the dragon's strike. A groan slipped out as she was shoved back, realizing another attack was incoming. Instinctively, she moved swiftly, blocking the attack with her sword. With a strong swing, she sent the opponent stumbling back. The opponent flinched but didn't seem worried at all. The dragon materialized right behind Ning Yan Yan. She saw the fierce dragon charging straight at her. She realized her escape route was totally blocked. She thought, well, it's come to this. With a quick swing, she deflected one of the flying swords. She blocked another sword, but the force sent her stumbling back. The sword's push helped her dodge the dragon's strike just in time. She regained her balance just as the dragon slammed into the ground. Her opponent clicked their tongue, clearly annoyed by her move. Shen Shi, on the other hand, casually observed the chaos. He thought, a beginner gold stage handling 3 intermediates? Not bad. He figured out that Ning Yan Yan knocked out one sword to create space, then used the impact of another to dodge the third's strongest strike. He realized Ning Yan Yan truly deserved the genius title. He assumed the foundation building disciples were under attack, and the elders were probably surrounded too. Shen Shi closed his eyes, seeing everything unfold in his mind's eye. He figured a gold stage cultivator was heading toward Dong Yuli's location. He quickly analyzed the situation. He suspected there was a traitor among the elders. Ning Yan Yan realized she couldn't shake them off and had to find a game changer fast. She jumped when Shen Shi's arm shot out of the water and grabbed her. Her pursuers were stunned as she got yanked into the water. She suspected the water ambush was a total surprise. Not realizing it was Shen Shi, she swung her sword in defense. She wondered how her full-strength sword swing got brushed off so easily. She questioned if this was the end for her. Shen Shi grabbed her waist and pulled her in closer. Ning Yan Yan was flustered by his sudden move. He told her not to move. Her evasion only covered a small gap, and he wasn't about to risk it. He insisted they get out of there first. They quickly moved through the water, inside the tiny orb Shen Shi conjured. He asked if she had a special way to contact Ning Shenming. She said she couldn't talk to Ning Shenming, but could send him simple messages. He reassured her it was fine, telling her to just let Ning Shenming know she was safe, and she agreed. Ning Yan Yan activated the device, and it glowed in her hand. She stared at his face, deep in thought. But she also focused ahead, serious once more. Noticing her intense stare, Shen Shi asked what was going on. She mentioned she didn't get something, and Shen Shi urged her to speak up. She asked why she should even bother telling Ning Shenming she was safe. He explained that, if he was right, the attack on her was probably meant to lure out the sect master. She asked him why he thought that. He pointed out that she should have sent a distress signal by now, but no gold stage elders came to help. She agreed he was right. He added that it meant the gold stage elders were probably tied up, and taking out Ning Yan Yan, an unripe disciple, wasn't worth the effort. She asked if he meant killing her would bait Ning Shenming into an ambush. He confirmed, saying it was a possibility. Grateful for her rescue, Ning Yan Yan asked where they were headed next. He acknowledged the other disciples were under attack too. Meanwhile, Dong Yuli's hair dramatically fluttered in the breeze. She and the disciples stood alert as they spotted an enemy in the sky. Dong Yuli pointed out someone was coming, so it was time to be ready. The enemy sneered, calling them a bunch of refinement stage toys. He gathered all his aura into his palm like a high schooler prepping for an energy blast. He hurled giant rocks, claiming they were all gonna die now. Xianyu jumped in front like she was ready to handle this. She waved them back, saying, "I got this." Xianyu raised the shield, looking like she was about to drop the hottest defense move. The enemy laughed, saying a low-tier refinement stage shouldn't even think about blocking his hit. The rock smacked into the shield and exploded into bits, looking like a bad special effect. Xianyu's shield revealed hidden layers, like a surprise plot twist. She casually blocked the other rocks like it was no big deal. Boom, there was a giant explosion. Xianyu smirked, thinking, turns out a refinement stage can block a gold stage's move. Shen Shi explained that with her 4 spirit roots, Xianyu's fighting style was pretty weird but effective, like breaking down a spiritual attack layer by layer. The enemy sneered, saying he didn't know Xianyu had such cool gear, but if she handed it over, he'd spare her life. Xiao Qia laughed, saying the enemy should wait for her master. If he was smart, he'd run while he could. The enemy brushed her off, asking who she thought her master was, but really, he just wanted to see the pretty flowers they'd turn out to be. Shen Shi scoffed out of nowhere. The enemy froze, sensing Shinshi's presence. Out of nowhere, chains wrapped around him. He panicked, realizing he was trapped by some serious pressure, and wondering how it happened. He knew this was bad. His body wasn't moving. Dong Yuli, Xiao Qi'er, and Xian Yu instantly saw their chance. Dong Yuli raised her hand, ready to unleash her move. Han Xianpai sprinted ahead, while Dong Yuli froze the water like she was making a magic trick. She used the ice as a shortcut to glide effortlessly toward the enemy. She launched herself off the ground, spinning mid-air like she had a point to prove. A well-placed kick sent him crashing across the ice, no chance to recover. The enemy grumbled about underestimating her strength but figured sacrificing a few spirit clones might help him survive. Once the martial arts faded, he'd finish them all off. Out of nowhere, Xiao Qi'er unleashed a cutting spirit wheel, catching him off guard. He couldn't figure out the move but sensed the danger was still real, even if he dodged it. Hesitation cost him. Unable to dodge, blood poured from the wound on his chest. He screamed, vowing to capture them all and make them suffer before finally crippling them. Suddenly, a sword pierced him from behind, and he groaned in agony. Xiao Qi'er smirked, reminding him there was no escaping once her master arrived. The sword was yanked out, leaving him breathless. Shen calmly retrieved the sword, as if it had never left his grasp. With a swift move, he shattered the orb protecting them both. Ning Yen realized that Shen wasn't just a swordsman. His skills with the Emperor's sword flow and the immortal sword were way beyond her expectations. How many secrets was he hiding? Xiao Qi'er sprinted toward Shen, eager to catch up. She called out for him as the others followed along. He checked in, asking if everyone was okay. Dong Yuli reassured them, saying they were fine. Xiao Qi'er couldn't help but ask what Ning Yen was doing with Shen, noting that she looked worse for wear. Ning Yen dusted herself off, clearing her throat. She explained it wasn't because Shen was rude or selfish he showed up, said nothing, and didn't even ask for her input. Dong Yuli was both surprised and pissed, while Xian Yu was just flustered. Han Xianpai was just as surprised, but Kang Yulang's thoughts were a little more mischievous. Xiao Qi'er, looking dangerous, confronted him, and Shen kept telling her to wait. Shen explained it was urgent. He had no choice but to break through the ice and drag Ning Yen along. Dong Yuli sighed, figuring that's how it was. Ning Yen casually mentioned that Shen wasn't in a hurry, and his "it felt good" made him curse silently. Shen couldn't help but wonder if Ning Yen picked that up from movies. Meanwhile, Xiao Qi'er was basically a fiery devil at this point. Shen cleared things up, saying Ning Yen meant their fight with the gold stage cultivator showed huge progress, and it felt pretty great. Sang Yuling agreed with Shen and then asked if she'd improved, saying she knew it but her senior sister never believed her. Ning Yen, Xiao Qi'er, and Xian Yu all noticed Sang Yuling hadn't done much earlier. Shen nodded, agreeing that Sang Yuling had improved, and he saw it all. Ning Yen joked that Shen was great at flattering people. Xiao Qi'er asked Shen why the ambush came out of nowhere, and if it was planned. Shen shrugged it off, saying it wasn't that simple but not to worry, he had it covered. He thought to himself, unsure how much the main story had shifted or how to get everyone back on his planned route. Ning Yen bluntly asked if that was the centennial snakefish, and why it was dead. Shen realized they just circled back, but figured it wasn't the worst thing. It wasn't so bad after all. Ning Yen laughed, claiming victory because she noticed first. But Xiao Qi'er darted towards the centennial snakefish, faster than anyone. She smugly reminded them the bet was about catching it first. Looks like she won. Ning Yen screamed, calling Xiao Qi'er shameless. Xiao Qi'er shot back, saying Ning Yen lost the bet. Meanwhile, Shen couldn't help but realize they were acting like kids fighting over a snack. Then, the centennial snakefish suddenly woke up. It started wriggling in Xiao Qi'er's grip, leaving her stunned. The snakefish shattered the ice and swam off, dragging Xiao Qi'er along. His other disciples freaked out, worried for Xiao Qi'er. But Shen calmed them down, saying there was no need to panic. Xiao Qi'er could handle herself. Shen plunged his sword into the hole made by the snakefish. Ning Yen noted the snakefish's strong water realm, wondering if Shen was confident Xiao Qi'er would be safe. Shen felt confident everything was under control, silently celebrating how the mistake might lead them back on track. Shen imagined the snakefish dragging Xiao Qi'er to the nascent cave, though it would take time to open it. Moments later, everyone waited around the hole. Ning Yen figured Shen's water skills could easily save Xiao Qi'er, wondering if he had something else in mind. Shen Shi indicated that it was about to happen. The water began to bubble violently. A burst of colorful light shot up from the hole. Ning Yen Yen recognized the 5-colored spirit light, questioning if it led to the immortal cave. The snakefish cracked open the cave. The snakefish forced its way in, with Shao Qi'er clinging to its tail. Shao Qi'er activated her cutting spirit wheel skill. She struck the snakefish's head with her attack. The snakefish shook it off, tossing her to the ground in retaliation. Shao Qi'er wondered how she could die when he hadn't shown up yet. She reassured herself that Shen Shi would come to the rescue. Shao Qi'er jumped up, narrowly dodging the snakefish's sharp teeth. The snakefish hissed at her, leaving Shao Qi'er speechless. Shao Qi'er remembered the mutated Edelweiss herb from Shen Shi, realizing there was no time to save it. She quickly ate the Edelweiss herb Shen Shi had given her. A surge of power erupted from Shao Qi'er's body. Shao Qi'er charged at the snakefish. She landed a blow directly to its eye. The snakefish hissed in pain. Shao Qi'er's weapon lodged in it as she was thrown to the ground. Shao Qi'er mentally cursed. She realized the power gap was massive. The snakefish hissed, ready to strike. As the snakefish charged, Shao Qi'er thought of Shen Shi. Out of nowhere, Shen Shi's sword slashed through the air. The sword struck, sending the snakefish crashing to the ground. Shao Qi'er knew Shen Shi had been there all along. Meanwhile, Shen Shi and the others entered the cave. Ning Yen Yen guessed the shifting array was from an ancient immortal, and if it was a gold stage cultivator, they were ridiculously lucky. Xianyu asked if it'd be worse if it was just a gold stage cultivator. Ning Yen Yen said a normal gold cultivator was fine, but ancient cultivators were rare and they'd have tons of cultivation materials, even if it was just that. She added that ancient cultivators work on arrays and secret arts wasn't too surprising, meaning the cave was safer than expected, perfect for treasure hunting. Xianyu agreed. Shen Shi thought the cave came from an ancient nascent stage cultivator, the level of a party leader, and after a fierce battle, Shao Qi'er would be badly hurt and pass out. Shen Shi figured Shao Qi'er's spiritual affinity would draw the earth spirits, just in time for her breakthrough. He imagined Shao Qi'er could jump to foundation building stage and finally harness her powers to carry him. Sung Yuling pointed out something had appeared, asking what it was. Shen Shi identified it as an earth spirit, explaining ancient immortals extracted them from the earth's spiritual energy. He explained that earth spirits naturally seek cultivators with a similar affinity. Sung Yuling noticed that Shen Shi had the highest affinity, and the spirits seemed to like him already. Shen Shi was surprised by what Sung Yuling said. He panicked, wondering if the spirits should be going after Shao Qi'er instead. Sung Yuling repeated that the spirits seemed to prefer Shen Shi. Shen Shi wondered if the heavenly Tao had given him this advantage and cursed his luck. He tensed, sensing Shao Qi'er's presence. Shen Shi realized it wasn't good. Shao Qi'er was nearby and just got hurt. He spotted Shao Qi'er, sprawled out on the ground ahead. Shen Shi rushed over to her. Figuring the plot wasn't going anywhere, Shen Shi decided to take charge. Shen Shi shoved a spirit into Shao Qi'er, ordering it to move along. He guessed the spirit's energy was fusing with the Edelweiss now. Dong Yuli asked about Shao Qi'er's injuries. Shen Shi assured her there were no issues, saying he'd keep an eye on Shao Qi'er since this was her shot, and the cave still had plenty of chances ahead. He figured that according to his storyline, Shao Qi'er grabbed the earth spirit, but the cave spit her out, meaning it had something he didn't plan for. Unknown meant danger. Out of nowhere, Xianyu called Shen Shi, saying something was behind him. Shen Shi wondered why he didn't feel danger if something was right behind him. To his surprise, a massive spirit appeared in front of him. The spirit grabbed Shen Shi, ready to speak, but got interrupted. Shen Shi yanked away, demanding to know what the spirit was up to. The spirit pulled him back, trying to speak, but Shen Shi interrupted, asking what she wanted and telling her not to ramble. Dong Yuli chuckled, asking what this weird creature thought it was, suggesting she should deal with it. Shen Shi insisted she wait, claiming the spirit was a great boost and a pure spiritual body was perfect for spirit weapons. Dong Yuli clearly didn't agree with Shen Shi. Shen Shi shot back, saying if she stayed quiet, he'd punish her with a spanking when they got back. Dong Yuli froze, shocked by Shen Shi's words. She shook, flustered, and called out to Shen Shi. Ning Yang Yen, confused, wondered what Shen Shi meant, having thought about it twice with no luck. Meanwhile, Shen Shi thought about whether he could summon the spirit anytime and turn it into something useful, like his spirit sword. He mused that the mountain was so high, climbing it would be a breeze, and the water so deep. Shen Shi figured the spirit's power came from the earth spirit, and it was just a coincidence that it had Tao rhythm and spiritual intelligence. He decided that given all this, he'd give the spirit more depth. The spirit grasped the sword Shen Shi offered. Shen Shi activated spirit binding. The spirit was taken aback as the sword's binding took hold. Her watery form solidified into flesh. Han Xianpai, Xianyu, and Tseng Yuling stared in surprise. Tseng Yuling pointed out the size comparison to Xianyu, who immediately protested. Shen Shi thought to himself that with the weapon spirit, Bihu's power would grow, and the cave trip had paid off big time. Following the MC definitely had perks. Shen Shi urged his disciples to stop waiting and get to treasure hunting. Later, the forest path fell silent. A portal materialized out of nowhere. Shen Shi and his disciples stepped out of the portal. Shen Shi figured Shao Qi'er would recover soon, and the cave would kick them out just as he'd planned. Shen Shi guessed that Shao Qi'er was about to wake up. Shao Qi'er realized Shen Shi would always be there to save her. Despite knowing, Shao Qi'er was still afraid, but Shen Shi recognized it was her moment to stand on her own. Shao Qi'er admitted her fear of being traumatized and asked if she could crash in Shen Shi's room later. Shen Shi figured Shao Qi'er had other intentions, wondering if she wanted to sleep in his room or make him her pillow. Ning Yan Yan awkwardly apologized, recalling how she'd lost and endangered Shao Qi'er. Ning Yan Yan offered Shao Qi'er help anytime she needed it. Shen Shi was pleased with Ning Yan Yan and Shao Qi'er's growing bond, feeling it respected the plot, and asked if Shao Qi'er had anything to say to Ning Yan Yan. Shao Qi'er thanked Ning Yan Yan and reminded her of their bet. Ning Yan Yan panicked, not expecting the reminder. Shao Qi'er half-joked, saying if Ning Yan Yan wasn't up for it, she wouldn't push, acknowledging Ning Yan Yan's strength. Ning Yan Yan froze, panicked when her gaze met Shen Shi's. She quickly signaled her need to leave, stumbling over Shen Shi's name. Ning Yan Yan muttered the word master. Ning Yan Yan announced her departure, leaving Shen Shi to admit he was struggling with the situation. Shao Qi'er grinned wickedly, scoffing to herself. Shen Shi remarked that the trial was valuable, though a test of their cultivation, and he'd stay on the mountain while they leveled up. 6 months later, snow blanketed Muling Fort. Yu Ting stood in the snow, with Xiao Bai and Bai Jishui keeping watch. Yu Ting began to release her aura. Bai Jishui was amazed, realizing Yu Ting had built her foundation in half a year, wondering what kind of monster her master was. Xiao Bai still couldn't figure out Shen Shi's intentions with raising a disciple with an empty spirit root, doubting it was for dual cultivation, thinking it was just to make her suffer. Xiao Bai congratulated Yu Ting, noting that reaching the foundation stage was a big leap in cultivation. Yu Ting asked Xiao Bai if the golden stage was really that impressive and if it meant she was close to Shen Shi's level, since Xiao Bai insisted Shen Shi was at that stage. Xiao Bai casually claimed she could wipe out dozens with a slap, but Shen Shi was different, so she couldn't say for sure. Xiao Bai pointed out that with Yu Ting's empty spirit root, she could reach the golden stage but would still struggle with spells, making her no match even for other golden stage cultivators. Yu Ting asked if there was no other option. Xiao Bai suggested Yu Ting should dual cultivate with Shen Shi to break her spirit root and start cultivating properly. Yu Ting was flustered, asking how Shen Shi would even accept, but Xiao Bai confidently reassured her that Yu Ting's beauty would make it irresistible. Xiao Bai couldn't help but think her advice wasn't half bad, planning to ask Shen Shi for more perks next time they met. Yu Ting silently admitted that dual cultivating with Shen Shi might actually work out, but she was still unsure. Flustered, Yu Ting kept thinking about the idea of dual cultivating with Shen Shi. Yu Ting couldn't help but imagine what that dual cultivation would be like. After imagining it, Yu Ting screamed and tossed around on her bed, embarrassed. Yu Ting reassured herself it wasn't about wanting to dual cultivate, but it was for her cultivation Shen Shi would understand. Moments later, Yu Ting was moaning, calling for Shen Shi, asking him not to do it there. Shen Shi suddenly sneezed loudly. Shen Shi mused about the nonsense that cultivators never get sick, questioning if sneezing was any different. Shen Shi reflected on how the disciples had reached the foundation building stage, even Xianyu with her shaky talent crafting a unique technique, just as the sect catastrophe loomed. Ning Xinming shared grim news a horde from the Di Qing sect was already barreling toward them. Still, he assured them not to panic. He'd already pinged the Yuhua sect for backup, and they should be on their way soon. One elder doubted Yuhua would bother coming, why risk angering Di Qing. Another chimed in, fearing Shang Ding was already doomed after Dong Ming's betrayal. Ning Yan Yan snapped, demanding everyone zip it. Her warning, keep talking, and they'd have her sword to blame. An elder grumbled about Ning Yan Yan's authority. Was she playing patriarch now? Another piled on, calling Yuhua shady and hinting doom for Shang Ding. Furious, Ning Yan Yan moved to retaliate, but Bai Ran intervened. Bai Ran clarified Shen Ning's intent. He just wanted folks to keep their cool and not stir panic. Elder Xie questioned Bai Ran's accountability. Would she take the blame if Yuhua ghosted them? Shen Shi suddenly addressed Elder Xie. Shen Shi declared bluntly one more word, and Elder Xie wouldn't be standing. Elder Xie and the others froze, stunned by Shen Shi's lethal promise. Ning Yan Yan stood before Shen Shi, speechless and wide-eyed. Shen Shi coolly asked if Ning Yan Yan had doubts. Ning Yan Yan shook her head. She wasn't convinced, she just didn't get it. Shen Shi explained that reasoning was pointless, better to strike first and prove your fierceness, hurt or not. Ning Yan Yan teased if she'd get a lecture after this mess. Shen Shi agreed, but only if she called him master. Flustered, Ning Yan Yan hesitated before mumbling, master. Bai Ran suddenly asked if Shen Shi thought Yuhua's masters would actually show up. Shen Shi casually revealed they were already here. Gu Ning greeted Ning Shenming, apologizing for being late and hoping he wasn't annoyed. Ning Shenming apologized for making her travel so far without a proper welcome. While the sect masters conversed, Luo Qingqing glanced over and smiled at Shen Shi. Shen Shi returned Luo Qingqing's smile with a knowing grin. Ning Yan Yan figured Yuhua showing up was great and all, but Di Qing's strength loomed large. Maybe it was time to rope in her master. Wielding her jade sword, Ning Yan Yan contacted Yu Wu Shuang, reporting Di Qing's annexation plot and pleading for help against imminent danger. Yu Wu Shuang was shocked anyone dared target Shang Ding. She grilled Ning Yan Yan for not spilling sooner, asked about Shen Shi's safety, and reminded her to focus on him, who was fine, just tired. Yu Wu Shuang pressed for details. Had Shen Shi brought back any women? Ning Yan Yan mentioned Bai Ran, prompting Wu Shuang to declare she was en route. Ning Yan Yan mused that Shen Shi had Wu Shuang's full attention, and with her power, they'd probably crush this clan crisis. Shen Shi suddenly questioned why Ning Yan Yan was lurking so far. Was she dodging him? Ning Yan Yan offered nothing but admitted she was just worried about the sect crisis. Shen Shi pressed, was that all, or was she hiding something else? He added that if she had time, she should drop by Air by Peak. Shao Qi'er apparently missed her, and it wouldn't hurt for them to get along better. Ning Yan Yan doubted Shao Qi'er's nostalgia, more like he wanted her gone. She figured Shao Qi'er had his motives but couldn't grasp why Shen Shi would fib about it. Maybe Shen Shi just wanted her there and cooked up excuses, she speculated. Reflecting on it, she realized her run-ins with Shen Shi had been scarce. Still, Shen Shi always seemed to have her back. Was Shen Shi into her? She couldn't help but wonder. Ning Yan Yan mentally sighed. Time to snap out of it, she told herself. Even if Shen Shi did like her, he belonged to Wu Shuang, the celestial darling. Who was she to compete? Meanwhile, Shen Shi sneezed again. Dong Yuli asked where to plant the flag. Shen Shi casually directed her northeast corner, just a smidge further east, then drop it. Dong Yuli figured Shen Shi had zero clue about formations. If this nonsense actually worked, it'd be downright creepy. Shen Shi confirmed they'd set the formation I next. Dong Yuli asked if he had a fitting treasure. Dong Yuli elaborated something to boost energy flow, defend, or go stealth mode would work. Shen Shi got the gist. They'd bury his jade lake there since offense was key. Dong Yuli raised an eyebrow. Wasn't that kinda sloppy? Shen Shi, shrugging off his lack of formation knowledge, casually tossed some Dao items and like it was a TikTok life hack and fired it up without a care. With a quick shovel move, Shen Shi plopped his Jade Lake spirit straight into the formation like he was planting magic beans. Shen Shi asked if this janky setup actually worked. Dong Yuli, wide-eyed, admitted it somehow did, even though it shouldn't have. Shen Shi, all serious, told them to camp in his yard like a VIP club's strict no-leaving policy until he came back. The crew exchanged nervous glances, low-key panicking about Shen Shi's bold bravado. Shen Shi coolly announced that the Mountain Gate formation was lit. Di Qing was here, and that battles meant death. He told them to look out for themselves because they're basically kids. Shao Qi'er, clearly emotional, dive-bombed into Shen Shi with a surprise hug. Xianyu chimed in with heartfelt vibes, insisting Shen Shi better come back in one piece. Seng Yuling promised to behave while Dong Yuli grinned mischievously, reminding Shen Shi about that spanking debt. Shen Shi smirked, thinking he couldn't ask for a better, or weirder, bunch of disciples. Shen Shi, radiating confidence, promised he'd be back, no doubt about it. With a dramatic leap, Shen Shi was off, leaving dust and determination in his wake. Shen Shi zipped through the skies on his flying sword like it was a magic skateboard. Huang Wuxian casually mentioned post-battle promises, reminding Wang Renmu he need his backup for the fight. Wang Renmu nodded appreciatively, accepting the task with calm resolve. Wang Renmu mulled over how Di Qing managed to recruit this powerhouse in yellow robes. Wang Renmu shuddered, recalling the yellow-robed guy turning a golden stage cultivator into human beef jerky nightmare fuel. Really? Ning Xinming, tired of the nonsense, called out Huang Wuxian, questioning why they couldn't just stay in their own lanes. Huang Wuxian chuckled, saying Ning Xinming hadn't changed. He suggested peace if they handed over their spiritual veins, no biggie. Ning Xinming shot back, deadpan, not happening. Huang Wuxian sighed dramatically, claiming he tried peace but guessed he'd have to either convince Ning Xinming or poof him out of existence. Ning Xinming casually dropped that he'd reached late nascent soul stage humble brag alert. Feeling uneasy, Ning Xinming rang up Gu Ning for backup. Gu Ning reassured Ning Xinming she'd handle Wang Renmu but asked for a pass on the rest. Ning Xinming expressed his gratitude. Wang Renmu confidently claimed Gu Ning was his problem, adding that Huang Wuxian would mop the floor with Ning Xinming in seconds. Gu Ning casually mentioned how she'd been itching to try the green snake art and hoped Wang Renmu could show her the ropes. Wang Renmu noted how rare it was to meet a nascent soul cultivator like her, and he'd been wanting to spar for a while. An explosion lit the sky as the two clashed, sparks flying. Wang Renmu scoffed, unharmed thanks to his trusty green snake art. He slipped his green snake art behind her, but Gu Ning seemed none the wiser. Gu Ning destroyed the sneaky attack with a single punch, not even glancing back. Gu Ning lunged at him, full of momentum. Wang Renmu unleashed his green snake art, aiming straight at her. Huang Wuxian casually pointed out the battle was getting pretty intense over there. He suggested it was their turn to get things moving. Shen Shi showed up and wondered if they'd started the action yet. He asked if he had missed the start of the show. Huang Wuxian shot him a questioning glance, wondering if he was Shen Shi. Shen Shi thought to himself, confused how Huang Wuxian knew him. He didn't think he had any beef with the guy, right? Maybe it was because of San Yan. Huang Wuxian dropped the bomb. San Yan's death was on Shen Shi's hands. Shen Shi immediately denied it, telling Huang Wuxian to stop talking nonsense. Huang Wuxian raised an eyebrow, wondering if Shen Shi was really going to keep denying it. He thought about how San Yan went after Shen Shi and just disappeared, no body, no trace. Could Shen Shi really be innocent? Huang Wuxian scoffed, certain Shen Shi couldn't avoid the blame for San Yan's death. Shen Shi challenged him to back up his accusations, questioning if he had any logic at all. Huang Wuxian laughed it off, clearly unbothered by Shen Shi's challenge. He proudly declared that big fists were the only logic that mattered. Shen Shi was half amused, half shocked at Huang Wuxian's logic. He couldn't help but ask if a big fist really was the ultimate logic. Huang Wuxian scoffed, telling his disciples to take care of Shen Shi. The disciples all nodded in agreement. Shen Shi reminded himself not to get sidetracked. Shang Ding's defeat was key to Ning Yanyan's rise. Shen Shi thought that while Ning Xinming was a good guy, he'd save himself if needed and still retire peacefully in the future. He wasn't sure how to create a big enough formation and knew it'd take forever to deal with those three goons. Bai Ran noted the enemies were golden stage cultivators and decided to help distract one, giving it her all. Ning Yanyan figured if Shen Shi could handle one quickly, she could take care of the other. Shen Shi realized they needed to wait. These enemies were on a whole different level. He was sure they shouldn't rush into a pointless death. Shen Shi sighed, his sword blocking an incoming attack. The enemy staggered back, blood spilling from his mouth. He couldn't help but think the gap seemed a bit too much, and they were far from being in the golden pill realm. Bai Ran was busy swinging her sword, deflecting another attack. The enemy spotted an opening, a smirk on his face. Bai Ran was breathing heavily, clearly struggling. Her eyes widened as the attack came at her faster than expected. She realized the cultivation gap was too big to parry in time but refused to back down. If needed, she'd use her secret art to hold the enemy. Shen Shi suddenly appeared, pulling her out of harm's way just in time. Shen Shi gave a nod, ready to handle the situation, but was interrupted before he could even speak. The sound of Ning Yanyan groaning in pain made him feel defeated. Ning Yanyan tried to figure out how to close the distance to use her strength, but the opponent's offensive was too overwhelming. Out of nowhere, Shen Shi appeared, parrying an attack with ease and catching Ning Yanyan by surprise. Ning Yen Yen thought he should save his strength, while Bai Ran believed they could still manage to hold on. Shen Shi couldn't understand what holding on meant when they were being pummeled. He was about ready to just go AFK. He summoned a shield of green orbs, surrounding all three of them in protection. The enemy's attacks were effortlessly deflected by the green orbs. The enemies staggered, all of them spitting blood at the same time. Bai Ran and Ning Yen Yen exchanged a look and nodded in sync. Ning Yen Yen decided it was their moment to strike, and Bai Ran targeted the right side. One enemy sensed something was off, deciding to go all in. Another wondered if Bai Ran and Ning Yen Yen really thought golden pill cultivators were pushovers, while the third proposed they team up. The enemies launched a united attack, but Bai Ran and Ning Yen Yen charged right into it. But their combined strikes bounced harmlessly off the green orb Shen Shi summoned. The enemies coughed up even more blood, realizing their attacks were useless. One enemy figured out the green barrier not only blocked attacks but reflected them, while another thought maybe those two could just use it to crush them. The last one wondered if Shen Shi was actually a genius playing dumb. Shen Shi raised an eyebrow when he noticed the enemies staring at him. Shen Shi pretended to be winded, cursing himself for forgetting his act. He wondered if it was too late to fake some blood spitting. One enemy thought Shen Shi was on the edge of collapse, and with three of them, there was no way he'd last. They were all in, no matter the cost. Shen Shi mentally rolled his eyes at how clueless the enemies were, silently wishing them good luck. Meanwhile, Ning Xinming unleashed his fiery aura, filling the air with heat. He summoned his treasured Lian Yan cauldron, a powerful tool for the battle. Huang Wushan noted the Lian Yan cauldron was an intermediate profound treasure, raising an eyebrow at Ning Xinming's early reveal. Ning Xinming just shot Huang Wushan a confident smile. He summoned a fiery dragon, sending it straight at Huang Wushan. Huang Wushan sneered, thinking that after all these years, Ning Xinming was still the same. Huang Wushan unleashed a rope-like aura, easily destroying Ning Xinming's dragon. He summoned a massive rock to intercept the dragon's attack, blocking it effortlessly. Ning Xinming realized Huang Wushan was stronger, and even with the Lian Yan cauldron, he could only hope to defend, not attack. He couldn't help but think, was this really the end for Shangding's celestial sect? Butterfly-shaped auras swirled around Air Bai Peak, adding an eerie glow to the scene. Shen Shi's disciples stood by, watching the battle unfold, safely tucked inside the protective dome he'd created. Xiao Qi'er was convinced that Shen Shi couldn't be harmed, no matter what. Out of nowhere, the yellow-clothed guy grinned, realizing he'd finally found the spot. He wondered aloud how many cute little mice were hiding there, imagining how they taste. The jade-like sword spirit came to life, stepping out of the formation. She blinked awake, ready for action. Without missing a beat, the spirit grabbed the sword and aimed it at the yellow-clothed man. The yellow-clothed man noticed the golden core realm sword spirit and thought it was a high-tier treasure, maybe even a snack. Dong Yuli wondered who this guy even was. The yellow-clothed man called Dong Yuli a little doll and casually told her that everyone in the formation, even the big shots, were basically ants to him. The spirit dug her feet into the ground, getting ready to launch. She lunged at him, sword blazing in her grip. The yellow-clothed man smirked, impressed by the spirit's nascent soul-level power. He casually flicked a dark aura orb from his fingertip, using it to block her sword. The dark aura spread out like wildfire after the sword made contact. He chuckled, impressed that the tiny sword spirit had forced him to use a whole 5% of his strength. The spirit ignored him, swinging her sword for another strike. The yellow-clothed man felt the spirit's power, and this time, he had to block her strike with his arm. The force of the strike sent him stumbling back. He landed, skidding a bit, clearly surprised. He cursed under his breath, realizing the spirit's first strike wasn't even her full power. He muttered darkly, deciding they all might as well die. The spirit wasted no time and charged straight for him. She swung her sword again, faster this time. He caught the spirit's sword just in time, grinning. He released more dark aura, swallowing the spirit's form. The spirit struggled, but the dark aura kept enveloping her. Xiao Qi'er couldn't help but wonder what kind of weird magic was sucking up the spirit sword's energy like a vacuum. Meanwhile, Huang Wushan swung his weapon, aiming straight at Ning Xinming. Huang Wushan's hit sent Ning Xinming flying backwards. Ning Xinming groaned as he slid through the air like a ragdoll. Huang Wushan laughed, calling Ning Xinming a turtle, joking he should smash his shell for him. Another swing, and Huang Wushan shattered Ning Xinming's Lian Yan cauldron like it was made of glass. Ning Xinming hit the ground with a bang, setting off a massive explosion. Sitting on the ground, he groaned in pain, like he'd been hit by a truck. Ning Yan saw Ning Xinming's state and immediately panicked. Without hesitation, she zoomed over to him. Ning Xinming was like, "What are you doing here? Run!" Huang Wuxian sarcastically commented on their touching master-disciple bond, promising to send them both to nirvana. Swinging his weapon, Huang Wuxian hit the green orb around Ning Yan, then coughed up blood. Huang Wuxian was left stunned and confused, staring at his blood-stained hands. He shot a confused glance at Shen Shi, like he was trying to solve a riddle. Shen Shi blinked, caught off guard by Huang Wuxian's sudden stare. Shen Shi groaned in pain, pretending he couldn't keep up, but Huang Wuxian wasn't buying the bluff. Huang Wuxian figured Shen Shi's at golden core, and that fancy technique must have some serious limits. He decided to use his earthbound locks and catch Shen Shi first, thinking about the details later. Shen Shi thought about Huang Wuxian using magical treasure against a golden core cultivator, and wondered how he should fake it. Just before the magical treasure hit, Shen Shi noticed a massive explosion of dark aura at Airby Peak and freaked out. Huang Wuxian laughed, advising Ning Xinming to surrender since the expert had entered the fight, and it was too late for anyone from the Shangding sect. The other disciples froze mid-fight when they felt the surge of dark aura from Airby Peak. Ning Xinming felt the pressure of the aura and cursed Huang Wuxian for hiding such a trump card. Huang Wuxian figured there were no threats left, so now it was just about capturing Shen Shi and forcing him to hand over his magic trick. Huang Wuxian froze, spotting Shen Shi. Shen Shi grabbed Huang Wuxian's locks, glaring him down. Shen Shi pointed out that if Huang Wuxian wanted a fight, he could have one, but sneakily attacking Airby Peak and his disciples? Not cool. Shen Shi made it clear that the plan was a mess, and Huang Wuxian could let him fix it. Shen Shi started sucking up spiritual energy like a vacuum. One disciple asked what was going on, another noticed the spiritual energy swirling around, and yet another wondered what realm someone had to be in to mess with energy like that. A massive energy vortex surrounded Shen Shi. The energy kept spinning and piling around him, growing stronger. One disciple asked if this was a nascent soul breakthrough. Ning Xinming clarified that it wasn't a breakthrough. Shen Shi had ignited his own cultivation. Ning Xinming admitted he never trusted Shen Shi, but here he was, risking his life for the sect. Ding Yanning instantly freaked out hearing that. Meanwhile, Shen Shi was practically drowning in spiraling spiritual energy. Shen Shi cursed mentally, realizing Airby Peak was probably raided, throwing his mind off balance, and giving the Tao a chance to flood him with overwhelming spiritual power. Huang Wuxian casually mentioned that even if Shen Shi had broken through, it was only the early nascent soul stage. Shen Shi thought it was good timing, he wasn't even in the nascent soul realm yet. Perfect time to light that energy up, he decided. Meanwhile, the yellow-clothed man laughed, choking Shen Shi's sword spirit. Han Xianpai suddenly showed up behind the yellow-clothed man, ready to kick him. But the yellow-clothed man's dark aura spread to her leg before she could react. The yellow-clothed man grinned, saying the sword spirit's energy was tasty, but nothing compared to Han Xianpai's delicious skin. Han Xianpai groaned, stumbling back to the ground. As she staggered, she thought, "Gotta buy time for the team before I'm toast." The yellow-clothed man asked if she wasn't running away, stepping toward her, ready to accept her offering. Suddenly, Shen Shi's dark hair swirled dramatically in the air. He landed smoothly between Han Xianpai and the yellow-clothed man, making a dramatic entrance. His gaze locked onto the yellow-clothed man, piercing through him with intensity. Han Xianpai gave him a puzzled look, wondering what brought him there. He casually mentioned that the outside issues were mostly handled, so he decided to return and check things out. Ning Xinming couldn't help but comment on how unexpected it was for Huang Wuxian, at the late nascent soul stage, to face this fate. He explained that it all happened from a simple swing of Shen Shi's sword. The yellow-clothed man stood his ground at Airby Peak, ready for a confrontation. He shook his head, disappointed by the strength of the sword spirit, but utterly unimpressed by the weakness of its master. He made it clear that it wasn't complicated hand over the spirit tools and sword spirit, and he'd spare Shen Shi. He added that Shen Shi should also offer a couple of the little girls, claiming he hadn't had a decent meal in a while. Shen Shi mentally groaned at the yellow-clothed man's incessant rambling. The yellow-clothed man was caught off guard by Shen Shi's words. He chuckled, thinking Shen Shi was just begging for death, so he'd grant the request. The yellow-clothed man unleashed his Black Lotus karmic fire technique. With a sinister grin, he intended for Shen Shi to burn to ashes, trembling in fear as he went. Shen Shi silently acknowledged how incredibly annoying this guy was. Shen Shi responded with his own technique, the wave-threading slash. His slash lit up the area, breaking through the yellow-clothed man's dark aura like it was nothing. The slash sliced straight through the yellow-clothed man's body, with enough force to carve into the mountain behind him. The yellow-clothed man was cleaved in half, blood spraying in all directions. Shen Shi glanced over at his disciples. Sang Yuling, Xian Yu, and Han Xianpai exchanged confused glances, unsure of what had just happened. Shen Shi urged them to hurry, pointing out that the yellow-clothed man was already dead, so there was no need to linger. They looked at each other, their faces blank with confusion. They silently agreed on one thing: Shen Shi was definitely impressive. Shen Shi mentally cursed, wondering if Sang Yuling and the others were just extra dumb, forgetting his constant reminders to cremate the body and erase all traces. He figured he might have flexed too hard and now had to come up with some wild excuse to cover it up. He decided to just roll with it. After all, the characters he created were all kind of dumb, like those brainless light novel types. Without warning, he drove his sword into the ground, like he was trying to make a statement. He faked being out of breath, playing up the whole I'm in pain act. His disciples freaked out, immediately rushing to his side with concern. Xian Yu asked what happened, and he casually brushed it off, claiming he just lit his cultivation and would be fine after a couple of years of chilling. Xiao Qi'er nervously told him not to scare her, blaming her own stupidity and vowing to behave from now on, so he wouldn't have to save her again. He told her that if she was serious about regretting it, she better not slack off during cultivation from now on. Sang Yuling pushed him for any last words, as if this was a big finale. He gave Sang Yuling a smack on the head, clearly annoyed. He reminded them to cremate the yellow-robed guy, and Xiao Qi'er nodded, taking mental notes. Ning Xinming by Ram, and Ning Yan showed up at Air by Peak. Ning Xinming's eyes widened in surprise at the scene before him. He saw Shen Shi's disciples burning a body, clearly thinking it was Shen Shi himself. He asked if Shen Shi was already cremated, lamenting that he didn't even get to see him one last time. Ning Yan questioned how that was even possible. Dong Yuli stepped in, explaining that it was Shen Shi's decision, so Ning Xinming didn't need to stress about it. Ning Xinming sighed, offering his condolences and inviting them to join his faction, promising to teach them everything he knew. Dong Yuli and Han Xianpai exchanged a strange look, leaving Ning Xinming confused. He cleared his throat and asked if they weren't interested or if Shen Shi had left any final words. Out of nowhere, Sang Yuling declared that Ning Xinming should watch her pole. Xiao Qi'er snapped at Sang Yuling, asking what she was doing and why she was suddenly going after Ning Xinming. Sang Yuling explained that when she spoke up earlier, she got smacked, so why should Ning Xinming be any different? Ning Xinming admitted that he should have been the one to die as sect leader, but since Shen Shi took the hit for him, it was only right they vent their anger on him. He told Ning Yan he was stepping down as sect leader, ready to live the hermit life in the mountains, and the title was hers from now on. Ning Yan tried to refuse, but he insisted she was more than worthy, and from that moment on, she was officially the sect leader, no objections allowed. Ning Xinming owned up to messing things up with Shen Shi, but Dong Yuli was about to explain before getting cut off. Out of nowhere, Yu Shuang showed up, immediately asking where Shen Shi was. Xiao Qi'er shot back, demanding to know who Yu Shuang thought she was. Yu Shuang fired back, asking what made Xiao Qi'er think she had the right to ask her name, and said she was looking for Shen Shi. Xiao Qi'er boldly stated Shen Shi was her master, and demanded to know who Yu Shuang was. Yu Shuang realized that Xiao Qi'er was actually Shen Shi's little disciple. She started to say she wasn't bullying Xiao Qi'er since she was her future madam, but then backtracked, clarifying she was actually the young master of Ta Yun's celestial sect and asked Xiao Qi'er to go easy on her. Ning Xinming's jaw dropped when he heard about the Ta Yun's celestial sect. Xiao Qi'er thought Shen Shi was badly injured and would take years to recover, so this was her shot to get closer, but then another stunning woman shows up, and she wondered how Shen Shi could be so, well, popular. Yu Shuang began scanning the area, looking for something or someone. She breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that at least Shen Shi wasn't around to witness her earlier blunder. Yu Shuang asked Ning Xinming straight up where Shen Shi was. Ning Xinming was about to answer, but Dong Yuli jumped in, explaining that Shen Shi was injured and resting at home, so she asked Yu Shuang to be patient. Ning Xinming raised an eyebrow at Dong Yuli's words, asking who exactly was the one being cremated, and she casually said it was an enemy Shen Shi had defeated. Ning Yan Yan and Bai Ran both urgently asked if Shen Shi was really still alive. Meanwhile, Yu Wu Shuang asked if Shen Shi was seriously hurt and if she could go check on him. Han Xian Pai apologized to Yu Wu Shuang, explaining that Shen Shi was in a coma and couldn't have visitors. Yu Wu Shuang casually stated that a quick peek would do, and she wouldn't disturb him. She mentioned she had some 6th grade Gui Yuan pills, enough to heal most injuries. Ning Xinming's eyes widened when he heard about the Gui Yuan pills. Xiao Qier eagerly asked Ning Xinming if those pills could actually heal Shen Shi. Ning Xinming declared that a single Gui Yuan pill could bring someone back to life and heal injuries like magic worth more than the most powerful treasures. Xiao Qier demanded the pills, and Yu Wu Shuang reluctantly agreed, revealing she only had one bottle with 10 pills. Guess she wasn't exactly stocked up. Xiao Qier explained that Shen Shi would need at least 2 to 3 years to heal, so 10 pills wouldn't cut it. She was going to need more. Yu Wu Shuang promised she'd bring more pills next time. Xiao Qier, pretending to be gracious, said Yu Wu Shuang could peek at Shen Shi, just a peek, and Yu Wu Shuang was all gratitude. Dong Yuli thought Yu Wu Shuang was out of her league. She couldn't even handle the battles at Airby Peak, let alone the dating wars. Yu Wu Shuang shrugged it off, thinking she'd be fine. Shen Shi was in a coma, so no chance of getting caught peeping. Yu Wu Shuang reached for the door. She froze, staring at Shen Shi casually munching on an apple, looking perfectly fine. Yu Wu Shuang blinked. Why was Shen Shi awake? She stuttered, asking if Shen Shi was really awake and, well, not dead after all. Shen Shi, in his head, wondered why Yu Wu Shuang cared if he was dead and how she could face him after playing cozy with Qianren online. Yu Wu Shuang, realizing she was being a little cold, mentally prepped herself time to charm Shen Shi, tell him she missed him, and that saving him was the whole reason she came. Yu Wu Shuang gave herself the green light. The mental prep was done, time for action. She scoffed, grilling Shen Shi if he really thought she'd come for him, before sarcastically saying it was just convenient, and storming off. He just annoyed her too much. She tossed one last line over her shoulder. I'm out, just looking at you pisses me off. Shen Shi, confused, wondered how he ended up on the receiving end of a scolding and why Yu Wu Shuang even bothered showing up. Yu Wu Shuang, flustered, took off in a hurry. She freaked out. What did she even say? Where was she going? Ning Yan Yan asked, amused, if Yu Wu Shuang was getting anxious again, messing up her words. Yu Wu Shuang, near tears, turned back to Ning Yan Yan. Then, with a dramatic wail, she announced she couldn't go on living. Ning Xinming and Shen Shi's disciples were totally shook by her meltdown. One of Yu Wu Shuang's followers let out an exasperated sigh. Another, quick to act, used his skill to shut her down. The ground cracked, and suddenly a dome surrounded Yu Wu Shuang and Ning Yan Yan. Ning Yan Yan shrugged. No big deal. Yu Wu Shuang had lost before, and crying over one defeat wasn't going to help. Yu Wu Shuang, shocked, muttered that Ning Yan Yan had totally changed. Ning Yan Yan promised Yu Wu Shuang more chances ahead if she kept an eye out, but Yu Wu Shuang fired back, calling her words harsh, asking if there was a way to fix things. Ning Yan Yan paused, deep in thought. She remembered how Shen Shi had totally wrapped her in his arms, like a knight in shining armor. Ning Yan Yan grinned. There was definitely a way. She could stage a scene where the damsel saves the hero. It had totally changed Yu Wu Shuang's mind about Shen Shi. Yu Wu Shuang raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Was this for real? Ning Yan Yan, all in, confirmed of course, it was real. Yu Wu Shuang called out Ning Yan Yan. She hadn't even gotten the video of Shen Shi's sermon yet, the one she begged her to record. Ning Yan Yan sighed, saying she had been working on it, almost there. Yu Wu Shuang scoffed, calling out that this was the same excuse as last time. Ning Yan Yan had definitely changed, but Ning Yan Yan shrugged. She was close to Shen Shi now, so cut her some slack. Yu Wu Shuang relented, trusting Ning Yan Yan one more time, but said if there were any updates, she needed to know immediately. Ning Yan Yan promised, no worries. Yu Wu Shuang handed over the Shen Shi care job to Ning Yan Yan, adding that no other woman better get too close to him. She stormed off with her crew in tow. Ning Xinming grilled Ning Yan Yan about her relationship with the young master of the Taiyuan sect. Ning Yan Yan explained that Yu Wu Shuang had saved her life, so she pledged loyalty to her, asking Ning Xinming to forgive her and find someone else for the sect leader. Ning Xinming was taken aback by what she said. He waved it off, telling her not to worry. He was still handing over the sect leader role to her, just hoped she'd do a good job with Shangding sect. Ning Yan Yan nodded, saying she'd obey. Ning Xinming, feeling pretty good about it, realized this meant they were aligned with the Taiyuan sect and that Ning Yen Yen had been crushing it as a disciple. During the battle, Huang Wushan got wrecked, his cultivation sealed, and his disciples either gave up or ran. Diqing's sect was done in seconds. Ning Yen Yen officially took over as sect leader of Shangding, her cultivation still low, but with Ning Xunming's support, she was bossing everyone around. Anyone causing trouble got a taste of Ning Yen Yan's sword, and even the senior folks who thought they could mess with her now kept quiet. Ning Yen Yan's rep as the unyielding fairy spread fast. Everyone was praising her, but only she knew it was Shen Shi's teachings that made her unstoppable. The Shangding sect went viral after one epic battle. News spread they were now under Taiyuan's wing, and hermit clans came visiting, but no one cared about Air by Peak anymore. Meanwhile, at Airby Peak, Shen Shi was chilling on his bed, with Xian Yu and Dong Yuli hanging out. Shen Shi, thinking to himself, noticed his disciples had leveled up since he sealed his cultivation. Shao Qi Air was grinding hard and finally acting like a protagonist, no longer a headache. Shen Shi realized that with Xian Yu and Dong Yuli pampering him, he was living the dream. Xian Yu suggested that maybe a pillow would make him more comfortable, curious if that would help. Xian Yu tried to figure out how he was feeling since his face was out of her line of sight. He shrugged off the angle issue, saying it was normal, and that he couldn't see her either, but it was comfy. Meanwhile, Dong Yuli was just chilling, smiling to herself as she read. He noticed how obsessed she was with formation books lately, wondering what she was reading this time. She casually mentioned that the book she was reading was That Night I Assaulted My Master Who Lost His Cultivation by Fairy Qing Lin, which was gaining popularity. He was surprised, not expecting their sect to have anyone involved in such writing. She corrected him, explaining it was from a fairy in the By Her Sword sect, and her books were all the rage in Qingzhou. She pointed out how her master would never have guessed she liked this genre. She confessed that the main character in the book resembled Shen Shi a lot. Shen Shi reacted with a simple, nonchalant response. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, don't forget to subscribe and like the video.